Good evening, everyone. The City of Grand Haven Special Joint Meeting of City Council and the Planning Commission is hereby called to order June 20th, 2023. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Grimes, Kozinecki, Owens,
Here.
Skelly,
Here.
Smelker,
Here.
Smolenska,
Here.
Galligan,
Here.
Dora,
Here.
Fritz,
Here.
Lowe,
Here.
McLaughlin,
Here.
Cummins,
Here.
McNally.
Here. I think on the agenda this evening, we have our planner, Brian Urquhart, delivering the 2021-22 annual report.
Thank you. So, welcome Planning Commission and City Council. This is our joint meeting that we hopefully have every year. Is this working? Be good to turn it on, Brian. Okay, so part of the reason why we're here is because we are redevelopment ready communities. I don't know who was ever here part of the initial process. We were certified in 2018. That certification lasts for 5 years, so 2023, we are due for recertification. And so, being the efficiency that I'm looking at here is we are looking to have a joint meeting, and that is with the City Council and Planning Commission. And the topic is going to be our annual report. The Planning Commission is required to prepare an annual report and deliver to City Council on the status of some of our planning activities that occurred in the last fiscal year. So I know this was from 21 and 22, and I was only part of 3 weeks of that. So it's a little tardy on that. I apologize. But still, to get this out there and kind of summarize what the activities were done in 20, 21, and 22 are good to hear. So just it's going to be brief, and I'll be able to take any questions if you have any. So last year, the Planning Commission met 12 times. They had 19 site plans. Special land use permits are 17, had 2 planned developments, 3 lot splits and some zoning changes, and a street vacation. There were 6 short-term rentals and 5 accessory dwelling unit requests. Some of the text amendments were adult use marijuana ordinance, and then there was a rollback of some of the latest on the 2021 zoning ordinance amendment that was quite a large overhaul in 2021 that we're wanting to kind of go back on some of those occurred in fiscal year 21-22. Special projects, again, this is last year. We participated in the My Green Communities Challenge. We got silver status. We started the master plan implementation, the master plan update. If you recall, I believe the last time these 2 boards were together was in January of 2022 when you had Progressive AE kicking off that process. And they were selected to be the consultant. And so they, throughout that master plan update, they were responsible for some community surveys, updating our future land use map, demographics that were part of the 2020 census, and then updating our goals and objectives. So also part of the board, part of the activity that the planning department works with is our zoning board of appeals. They met 7 times last fiscal year. So a variance request comes through oftentimes before it needs requiring planning commission approval or administrative approval or even council approval. 4 were approved, 2 were denied, and 1 was withdrawn. So I put in my report on that, could you back to the last slide? Thank you. That it seemed like it was less than previous years. Part of that could be attributed to the high cost of construction and more of a risk-adverse approach. So, and I want to make it clear when we go to the ZBA, there's a high threshold to meet for the Zoning Board of Appeals to be approved. And I do my best as liaison to try to make sure you vet those cases accordingly, that the ones that have merit usually would go before that board. But everyone's has the opportunity to appeal a decision. Next slide. And so construction trends, last fiscal year, there was about 2,300 total permits. That is almost 8.7 increase from fiscal year 21-22. That resulted in about 3,300 inspections, a 26% increase. And you can see on the chart, I know it's a little small, is that we had 675 building permits. The revenue, building permit revenue was about 374,000. And the total construction value of those projects was about 52 million. Next slide. And so of those total permits, like I said, there was an increase, and you can see that largely those permits are largely from the building department, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and then our zoning permits. Next slide. Rental housing activity. We always have a lot of discussion on rental housing. So based on the figures, we have just over 2,000 total rental units, and these are inspections are annual performed by either the code enforcement or the fire inspector. Of those registered rentals, now those are rental units, registered rentals are addresses. That is 771. We have about 465 long-term and then 286 short-term rentals that are registered within our system for last year. Next slide. And so moving ahead, now that I've gotten our fiscal year down, I'll present it to the Planning Commission probably in August, is talking about what we did last year when I was actually a staff member. But the master plan update, obviously what was approved, and then talking about our My Green Communities submission for last year, talking about the diesel plant redevelopment plan review team where we made some changes, and then what you'll probably be seeing either before council or before Planning Commission is a memorandum of understanding from the MEDC and their RRC process, is that where you would allow that recertification of the redevelopment-ready communities for another 5 years. And so there's a lot of this is procedural. So we have a responsibility to upload all these best practices to remain certified. And that a lot of those best practices are handled administratively. We checked a lot of those off the box when we adopt the budget, the capital improvement plan, our economic development strategy. The master plan was a huge one, updating our zoning ordinance every so often when it aligns with that. And then a lot of it's just kind of procedural, where we have to make sure that when we have a new member that comes on one of our boards and commissions, they're aware of an intake packet so they know what to get in. I've started to assemble that. A lot of help from Maria on that, so thank you for that. Reminding them of how to operate in an open meeting and then training strategies and then things of that nature, then also marketing and economic development strategies. So we're really close to getting it. A lot of the legwork for the RRC certification was done years ago, but it's definitely served as a benefit for us to continue to seek that, and we hope to have that sort of recertified come a few more months. And so this is just kind of killing two birds with one stone with the annual report. I know it was pretty brief of that, but that is a large aspect of what the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals did in the last year. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Anybody from Planning Commission have anything that they'd like to bring up to council that might be useful in terms of for us to know or for resources that you require or anything like that? I mean, it's we don't get together all that often, and if there's any issues that you'd like to raise, this is an opportunity to do that. Mike?
We have opportunity for a couple new members coming up here that you probably are well aware of. Look forward to seeing someone in the future. Other than that, I think we're pretty much good with everything we cover. It may be good to sit down once in a while and have a chat on some maybe new things that come up that are made aware to Brian, and sometimes he brings them to the Planning Commission, and we kind of look at it and go, yeah, maybe not, might not be an interest on council, but some things maybe there would be. So it might do some good to sit down and have a couple of these a year maybe, just to kind of get a feeling for where everybody's at, especially after November. And sometimes the landscape changes and sometimes it stays the same. But regardless of how it ends up, it would be good to sit down and kind of get a view of what you folks see as the path forward.
I think that's a good idea, Mike, and some good input. Thank you. Anybody else? You guys got anything you want to pass to Planning Commission? Karen?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate our thanks to the Planning Commission for the master plan update. You know, the master plan is an incredible document if people sit down and actually read it in terms of describing the direction, the strategic direction that we want to take. And I just appreciate all the time that you all took in sort of getting that right, along with Brian. And, you know, it wasn't just for compliance reasons, but now we have, you know, an update from that 2017 document that truly reflects the direction that we want to go in that planning area. So I thank you for that.
Brian, got anything?
Yeah, I just want to, I'll just hop in like quick.
Okay, Mike?
I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you guys for volunteering to be on a board for us like this. It's pretty important. You guys are actually have the pulse of the city is what you guys really are. You represent all that. So thank you so much for volunteering and stepping forward. And if anybody's out there, we do have some openings coming up. So if you'd like to, please fill out an application and join us. Thank you again for all you've done.
Ryan?
Hoping I can put Brian back on the spot a little bit, just to elaborate a little bit more on what it means to be kind of touch on some of the requirements, but what it means to be these mics seem more sensitive.
Redevelopment ready.
Right, but I'm saying these mics seem more sensitive all of a sudden. But what it means to be a
Did we get
redevelopment,
updated last week?
maybe, I don't know. Yeah, they are on top of it. Wow. But what it means to be a redevelopment committee, and what are some of those benefits from that?
So it's been a program that's been around for almost a decade now. And we were the 27th community that was received certification status. And a lot of the benefits are internal, making sure your processes are complete, making sure your orientation matters are done, your plan review are in an efficient manner. It's all been institutionalized, everything along those lines. And it really kind of helps demonstrate that you are a community that if someone were to, for an example, wanted to get some information on a piece of property, for example, what could be done with this piece of property? Is your website up to date? Do they have the contact information there? These are all part of the processes. And so what that means is that they don't have to wait until the office opens to call and get that information. You can be able to do that. That's just one aspect of being redevelopment ready community. The other aspect, obviously, is the technical assistance that we can get from the MEDC, and when you put that on, it's competitive when you look at it from grant perspectives. And so it's obviously there's a financial benefit and there's some technical assistance. So to give you another detailed example, Ryan, if say we wanted to study, we wanted to look at a zoning ordinance that has been causing some issues maybe. We could reach out without going to the private consultant and ask for, will you be able to assist that with our MEDC Redevelopment Ready Communities Planner? And they would get us in touch with a consultant, and there's dollars there each and every year for these communities to get that can help us implement our goals that are, you know, development and redevelopment related. So it really, it's a tool, how much you want to use it as a community, how much capacity do you have? So it really puts you kind of on a leg up to do that. And I think from my perspective, the legwork was done, but I feel like it's a real important task to continue to remain redevelopment ready communities and seeking some of those benefits and working closely with the state. I don't know if you saw in the last, there's a staff report that we did a little tour with our representatives from the MEDC on some potential projects. It kind of gets you right on that pulse, and you're able to get some of those more intimate and maybe even opportunities for other larger scale projects that may require some dollars from the state. And so being redevelopment community is to institutionalize that no matter who comes in, and a lot of that stuff it paid its dividends because of everything, all the processes that came in after Jennifer left. I came in and it was well there. So that's another aspect is you got the process in place and you got the personnel. So it really kind of has that aspect of, okay, this is efficient, this is well streamlined, and then the people that are on the staff or in the public or your boards and commissions know what their roles are. So it's a very comprehensive approach. So there are definitely fiscal, but yes, there is benefits that, help us long-term in those lines. So it's a program that a lot of communities, there's two different variations of an essentials or a certification. We are going for the certification. That's the higher threshold. That does require a little bit more labor, but I think we're really close, and I would definitely say that's the benefit. And you could talk to any other communities that are seeking for it. I think cities and villages benefit the most, just because they also like to focus on traditional downtowns, and some of those core cities also have a benefit as well. So, which Grand Haven is.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and thank you for picking up the ball and running with it midway through, and I'll echo the thanks to our fellow planning commissioners that sat in your seats. It's not always easy work. There's a lot to consider, but you guys have undertaken a lot the last couple of years with zoning ordinance update, pretty significant update, and then to follow that right up with master plan update. No shortage of work, so thank you for everything.
Kevin?
Just reiterate what Ryan just said. I had the pleasure of working with some of you, and it was always a pleasure. We took on some big items, and you continue to do that, and I want to thank you for that.
And I'd like to add my thanks, and I see Robert Grimes isn't here, but I'd just like to thank him for his service. He moved out of the community about, I'm going to say a year and a half ago, and asked to finish his term, which he is completing as of the 30th of June. So we will bid him farewell, but I think that he served as chair for a while. He did a great job for us as a city, and I know Grand Haven continues to be special to him. So thank you all for your service, and if you see Robert, pass that along. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Well, that was the shortest meeting ever. I wouldn't say. order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Fritz,
Here.
Lowe,
Here.
McLaughlin,
Here.
Cummins,
Here?
McNally.
Here. Our invocation this evening will be delivered by the Reverend Emmett Brown, Trinity Reformed Church of Grand Haven. Would everyone please rise and remain standing after invocation for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Heavenly Father, we come to you with humble hearts, thankful for this opportunity to meet, to be able to deliberate and decide what is best for this beautiful town. Father, I pray that as we move into this meeting, that you would remove all sense of vanity, pride, arrogance, and haughtiness that would cause us to be puffed up in our own abilities and allow us to realize none of this happens without you and all that you've provided. In a time when it's easy to get full of ourselves and prideful, help us to remain humble. When the rest of the world is telling us that we should be overly excited about our accomplishments, help us to remain grounded, knowing that not a single one happens unless you say so. So, Father, we pray for unity and peace. We pray, Father, that you will help us to do what's best for others so that we would put aside any selfish motivations. And all this, Father, we pray in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. The first order of business this evening is new appointments to boards and commissions. Would the clerk please read them?
Tricia Harrell, Airport Board, term ending June 30th, 2028. Larry Burns, Duncan Park Commission, term ending June 30th, 2026. Greta Fuller, Human Relations Commission, term ending June 30th, 2024. It's a student position. And Sydney Kroll, Human Relations Commission, term ending June 30th, 2024, also a student position.
Could I get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion or any questions?
Just want to welcome them. As long as we get to vote here, and just say yes.
Yep.
But I want to say thank you for stepping up and wanting to be on these boards.
Very well qualified.
I would like to just make a couple comments about the students that I selected, and actually, I wanted to make comments about the pool of students from which I selected, including these two students. There were 8 or 9, and they were all incredibly accomplished. They were smart, they were funny, they were engaged in the community, they were concerned about the world around them, and they all came out of Grand Haven High School, and one was homeschooled, actually. And I just want to say that it's a really great reflection on our community that those kids want to do this work. So that's all I needed to say. And I guess one more thing, I'd just like to recognize Larry Burns, who's been working on one of the subcommittees of our Sustainability Commission, just for his dedication particularly to preserving the tree canopy in town. Okay. Would you call the roll, please, Maria?
Fritz,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. Okay. At this point, we've got a presentation scheduled from HDR, which is the consultant who is managing our Harbor Island remediation. Ashley, you're going to take this one away, right?
Yep, we are letting them in the Zoom room as we speak. Hi Laura, can you hear me?
Not yet.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As soon as you are ready, the floor is yours.
Okay. I think you need to disable the screen sharing so I can share it.
You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening. Thank you for inviting the HDR team to present to the City Council today. And today we'll go over with a brief intro. I have some team members here with me. We'll go over communication recap that we've done since our last March update. And then we'll give a CCR data to date and a PFAS update, and then what's our upcoming tasks. So I'll start off. My name is Laura Zawaida, and I've presented to the council before, and I'm the HDR project manager. With me here is, I'll start with Molly Reeves. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Hi, I'm Molly Reeves. I am a hydrogeologist with HDR, and I am leading up the technical discussions regarding the CCR study at Harbor Island.
Okay. Wendy, you're on mute.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Michael, and I am an engineer with WSP. I am the project manager for the PFAS investigation at Harbor Island.
Okay. And Dr. Matt Reeves?
Hi, I'm Matt Reeves. I'm a hydrogeologist at Western Michigan University, and I specialize in contaminant transport and surface and groundwater systems, and I'm on the PFAS side, and PFAS is one of my main research focus.
Thank you. So we'll start off with a communication update. Since we met with the council last March, we had a CAG meeting in March. We also participated in Earth Day on Saturday, April 29th. We had a booth. We had a very good people coming in and asking us about Renew Harbor Island. We submitted our groundwater, our first quarter 2023 groundwater monitoring report. And that's a state of Michigan Eagle required report, and it's on our website. And then our incoming data, we have PFAS data to date. Our last sampling event was in May, and we'll talk about it later in the presentation. And then we're continuing our background CCR sampling. We've done in March, April, and May, and we have a sampling event coming up next week. We're giving this council update. We had a CAG meeting last week. And we'll do a BLP meeting. Actually, the update was going to be in July. You're probably familiar with this anticipated timeline. We are still in the fall 2022, March 2024, and we are in the background monitoring phase. And Molly will talk about that more when we give the CCR update. This is a slide that I kind of like to bring the public's attention to how we manage the data and the time that it takes from gathering the data, sending it to the lab for analysis, and what we do with the data when we get it, and how it finally gets to whether it's to Eagle or the CAG or to the public. So it's a lengthy time process. So I'll turn it over to Molly to give the CCR update, and I'll be advancing the slides.
Okay, great. All right, I'll kick us off. So you guys have seen this slide before, probably at the town hall presentation, and it's just again to reorient you with regard to where the CCR units are on Harbor Island. Two of them are pointed out on this slide. And then there is also a north channel that maybe you can see her mouse coming out, and that is a discharge from one of the CCR impoundments there, and it discharges there to the north. So those are the CCR units that we are evaluating if there is an impact to groundwater and surface water resources from the ash that was stored in those CCR impoundments. This is a flow chart that we have also presented previously at the town hall, and it's just trying to give an overview of the flow of tasks that are required to comply with both the federal and state CCR programs. The regulations are rather specific in the process of studying the CCR, evaluating if there's an impact, and then the corrective measures process. So there are not only sort of defined stages, but defined timelines associated with them as well. So this is just trying to give a big picture overview of that process. And the check marks, the little green check marks up there, are trying to let you know where we are at in the process. So, you know, when HDR was first brought on board, we did a lot of data review. We developed the work plan. We established that monitoring network. And as Laura said, we have been sampling for background monitoring since late 2022. So we are in this, that's what the star means. That's the stage we're at right now. We're currently performing background monitoring. That's a really important step in the process because we have to establish what those background groundwater conditions look like before there was potential impact on the island, because those values established, they help us to understand if there is an impact to begin with, and if there is, what are we going to clean it up to at the end. So it's real important that we get that background monitoring right. And because it's a statistical process after you to develop those background values, groundwater concentrations, that's a statistical process, which means that we need a good data set to get those statistics. And that's why it requires a minimum of 8 events. Moving forward, we'll have additional events, and we'll continue to go back and double check if those background values are good values. But that's why we've really got to get this background values right to begin with, and we're still in that process now. As soon as we're done with the 8th round, we can move into the statistics where we develop those values, and then we can make those determinations. Is there an impact? If so, to what level, what degree, and where? And then we can move into evaluating corrective measures. So that's what this flowchart is trying to let you know.
Quick question. How many of the 8 events have we had?
Yeah, I'm going to show you
events?
that, I think, on the next slide. But yes, we've done 6, and next week we'll do our 7th round. So we're almost there. In the beginning of August will be our 8th round. So by the time we get to so after that, early August, we'll have about 6 weeks to get our lab results back, and then we do the statistical analysis. And so that means in fall we're going to be, and I've got some slides coming up here to show you all the things that are going to trickle out after we get that in the fall.
Thank you.
Okay, this is just a map to remind you that we are monitoring all over Harbor Island. So you can see the 2 CCR units. One is a teal outline there on the upper left. The other one has a pink outline. And so we are doing groundwater quality monitoring around those units. We are doing background monitoring over on the east side of the island there. Those are our wells that are trying to establish what we think is unimpacted groundwater for comparison purposes. And then we've got wells all over the island for water levels and also surface water points, both internally at those internal wetlands, internal ponds, and then at the Grand River, at South Channel, and the North wetland area. So because it's equally as important for us to understand those groundwater levels as the surface water levels, so we can understand how they're interacting with each other. So we don't have to get into the specifics on this map, just letting you know we have it pretty well covered across the island.
My mouse is slow, so it takes me a minute to.
Okay, so activities to date. You guys have heard this part before, but back in November of 2022 is when we put in the 2 new monitoring wells. After that, we started the background monitoring of those 8 events. So to date, we've done 6 rounds of background monitoring. The last one, as I said, will be in early August. The other thing that we've been doing in that time period is the reporting that's required. Under the state and federal program, there's an annual report that was done back in January. It's on the website. And then there's also quarterly monitoring, quarterly reporting required under the state program. And so we did that one in April. It is on the website. And of course, every quarter thereafter, you'll be able to see a state monitoring report. We have also been continuing discussions with Eagle regarding the administrative consent order. So it is not finalized yet, of course. It is still in draft form, and continued discussions back and forth with all the parties and legal counsel. We are also still having discussions with both Eagle and EPA regarding the North Channel investigation. The North Channel is a discharge point from one of the CCR units out to the surface water. And really that investigation is to help us to delineate the ash that has discharged from that impoundment out into the surface water. So we need to understand the extent of that ash and the depth, really, so we can then determine what the appropriate course of action is, and if it's to remove it or if there's not enough of it and it would be too difficult to remove. So we're still in the process with talking with EPA back and forth about that. But we've made some good progress. We've done some drilling out there, and we've got some good maps and good back and forth with EPA. So we're getting close on that one. So this is a map that's showing you, it's a groundwater contour map. Sometimes we call it a groundwater potentiometric map, but it's showing you groundwater elevations and surface water elevations. And we use this to help us see which direction is groundwater flowing. So not only which direction is it flowing from a what's up gradient, what's down gradient perspective, but how is it interacting with the surface water? Is it discharging to the ground river, or is the ground river recharging into the island and recharging the groundwater? And of course, that's real important from a transport perspective. So if you assume that we are going to have impacts from the CCR units, we want to understand, are those metals potentially discharging out to the surface water? So this particular map is from just one snapshot in time. This is from the sample event we did in May of 2023. We can see that over on the very west side of the island there, it's discharging, groundwater is discharging to the ground river. On the south side of the island, groundwater is discharging to the South Channel. In the middle of the island, the groundwater on both sides is discharging to that internal big wetland area. And that wetland is acting as a sink, and it is evaporating, evapotranspirating, and losing water in the middle of that. So again, this is just a snapshot in time, trying to help you to see that it's important to us to understand these relationships between surface water and groundwater, so that as we move forward with corrective measures and understanding the transport of metals on the island, we know where it's going. Also, it's important to know that the criteria that are used to evaluate if you have cleaned something up, right? So a cleanup criteria are oftentimes developed based on that discharge point between groundwater and surface water. So if you do have groundwater discharging to surface water, that is a criteria. It's called the groundwater surface water interface criteria. And so where that discharge occurs is a criteria point, is a compliance point. And so that's important for us to make sure we really understand, is that what's happening? Is it discharging from groundwater to surface water? So in order to make sure we're getting that right, that aspect right, sorry, I'm almost there. The last bullet, I just didn't want to leave this. I wanted to address here because I've got the word propose in here, because we're going to propose very soon. We'll be giving a proposal to install transducers at the site. The transducers are loggers that we put down the monitoring wells or attached to a staff gauge, and they're going to monitor on a much more frequent basis than we can go out there and monitor. They'll, like on an hourly basis, they're going to log what these elevations are in some of the wells and some of the surface water, so we can really get that relationship right. Because right now we've got, data every 5 weeks. Moving forward, we'll have data quarterly. So we've got to understand that relationship on a more frequent basis. So you'll see that request. From a groundwater quality standpoint, I'm not going to share concentrations today. I'm going to just kind of give you a high level. And again, the reason I'm holding off on that is just until we get these background values and some of the statistics completed. And when we get that done in the fall, then we'll come back and give you some actual concentrations. So, but from a high level, wanted to share with you that I think the best way to describe it is no surprises. So, similar results, I would say, to what was seen under the monitoring that BLP did. We are seeing what I would call likely statistically significant increases at both CCR units. Those are probably going to be boron and sulfate, or are likely SSIs. Again, SSIs means you're comparing the downgradient concentrations to background. And if you have statistically values that are higher, that's going to be an SSI. So I think we're going to have that for boron and sulfate. That would trigger us into what's called assessment monitoring, which is just more constituent list, more parameters that we evaluate. And I do think when we get to that phase, it's looking very likely that we're going to have levels of arsenic, boron, lithium, and sulfate that are over what are going to become your groundwater protection standards. So I'm using these generic terms like likely and future groundwater protection standards because those things are tied to that background value I told you about. So as soon as we get that, we can then develop your groundwater protection standards. And then I can really give you a firm yes, arsenic is over. I can tell you right now, it's looking likely. So that's about as far as I can go today, but it's looking likely on those. But again, no big surprises. These were similar constituents that we saw under the BLP program that they also had thought were over groundwater protection standards that they had under their program. What happens if you have SSLs? Well, what happens with SSLs means you trigger corrective measures, and it's looking like we'll be triggering corrective measures under both the state and federal programs. So we already knew that. I'm not trying to, no big new news here, but just wanted to share that give you a water quality update that it is looking about the same.
Could I ask, I'm sorry, I missed a word. What kind of measures? Corrective measures?
Oh, corrective measures.
Okay,
Yes. Thank you for asking. Yeah, that's referring to, sometimes I use words that are pulled from the regulations instead of words that maybe, you're expecting. So that's one of those words that they use in the regulations. They call it corrective measures, and you do what's called an assessment of corrective measures. And that's a feasibility. It's a feasibility report where you line out what are the potential remedial options and what are their pros and cons and which one is going to work best at this particular site. So corrective measures is the same as remedial options.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'm almost done here. Some of the next steps on the CCR side of things, and then Wendy is going to give you great detail on the PFAS side of things. But on the CCR side of things, again, we've got to complete the background monitoring, and then we'll do the statistics and get those background values. After we're done with background monitoring, we're not done monitoring, right? We will be monitoring at this site for the foreseeable future. I want to be really clear about that. So at that point, we're going to move into quarterly monitoring, and we'll be doing that at the site for years to come. And we will continue with the compliance reporting. Of course, that's quarterly, semi-annual, and annual reporting requirements. And then additional documents that are going to fall out as soon as we're done with this background monitoring process. It's almost like dominoes after the background monitoring, because we'll do a hydrogeologic monitoring plan. We'll do an assessment monitoring plan, a response action plan, that assessment of corrective measures that I just told you about a minute ago. So again, those things aren't required until we know you have triggered that So that's what I mean by I can't say 100% we're there, but it's sure looking, it's looking very, very likely that you will have to do an assessment of corrective measures. And those two documents will have enforceable schedules. So it'll be real important that we all are comfortable with the schedules that are required components of those documents. And then on the next page, I have a couple more documents that are required because we're not done. Like I said, it's a domino and it'll just be boom, 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 a lot of documents coming out. There will be a remedial action plan. And then we're going to have a period where we talk about these remedial options for a while. That we've got to sit on, once we're going to lay out what those options are, it's going to take us a chunk of time to get everybody on board with that before we would do what's called a remedy selection report. So there will be a pause button there after we look at the options, pause, everybody agree what we're going to do, and then a remedy selection report, and then the closure plan and moving forward with closure implementation. Additional data collection. I'm almost done. I have groundwater model question mark, and that's just me trying to set the stage for you guys and let you know that we need to start having that conversation. So that'll be something that we're going to start to talk to Derek and Ashley about, and everybody just to talk about, because it's a big effort. It's a significant time commitment to do a groundwater model, and we all just have to make sure that we are on board. It's not a required component, right? In the regulations. And so I have some sites where we do it and some sites where we don't, and for very specific reasons. So it's just time to start having that conversation about if it's going to be a useful tool for us on this site. And then data collection, the other thing that we'll be initiating in the fall, you'll start to see a proposal from us regarding data collection associated with this assessment of corrective measures. So in order to assess if some remedial alternatives are truly feasible at the site or not, you've got to start collecting data to understand if it's feasible at this particular site. So we know pump and treat is a remedial option. Well, is it at this site? We would look for a pump test to be completed on the site to evaluate if natural attenuation is a good option at this site. We need to do some sampling and really analyze that. And that might, depending on some of the corrective measures that we want to evaluate, maybe some geotechnical borings. But just kind of wanted to tease that a little bit today. We don't have to get into that, but I wanted to tease that that's sort of what's coming up in the near future. I think I'm done.
Yes, thanks, Molly.
Okay.
And then any questions for Molly?
The enforcement schedules, is that both EPA and Eagle?
Yes, definitely. They are quite, the upside here is that Eagle and EPA are talking. So that's the upside. And as we work on the details associated with the administrative consent order, we are also discussing with them, making sure that an understanding of the federal timelines is also, being not being overlooked as we look at the deadlines put into the administrative consent order. So the upside is they really do track pretty well together.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay. So next steps outside of the CCR is we have the coal pile removal. We have this task that it's on hold right now, and that would require preparing the removal plan for the coal pile. So currently these two tasks are on hold. So now we move to Wendy to give an update on the PFAS.
Can we,
Yes.
can we stop for a
Yes,
second,
yes.
Laura?
Yes.
I think we're wondering why they're on hold and if,
So when we started, we basically took the plan that BLP Golder had for the coal pile, and they had plans that they submitted to Eagle, and all we had to do is to basically bring contractors on board to remove it. One component here is that in order to complete that task, we need to dewater. And because of the presence of PFAS, we would have to treat for PFAS before discharge. So until kind of the maybe cost allocation of how that task is going to do to be like who's going to pay for what when it comes to PFAS contamination, I think that's why it's on hold right now. Maybe Derek can give kind of more update on that, but that's kind of from our perspective.
Yes, good evening, Your Honor, fellow counsel, Derek Gatis, Public Works Director. Laura's right, this comes down to funding for and I'm not going to say just PFAS, but it's mainly PFAS. When we pull that water out of the ground to remove the rest of that coal, there's not a lot of coal left, but we have to remediate it down to a certain percentage. So there's got about 3 feet of that dirt needs to be unearthed and hauled away and then replaced. There's the groundwater table will prevent us from doing that. So in order to pull that groundwater out, there's nowhere for us to put it. It will have some contamination in it, and PFAS and some other contaminants that we're gonna have to deal with. And so the cost for that contamination remediation has not been allocated by this council or the BLP. So we are required to do it. At this point, we haven't been told there's a deadline. So
Is there a cost estimate, Derek?
the last one I proposed last year, I think was like $158,000 just for the remediation costs.
And that is both the coal pile and the adjacent soils, or just,
That's just the soils for the coal
soils?
pile.
Yeah.
That's the estimate.
And it's something we could move forward with under the existing, if we had funding for it, we could move forward now. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. The bids that we received when we took over from the BLP are outdated. So we just start all over with a new bid package and try and find some contractors to complete the work.
And we have funding at this point based on money we've shifted over for cleanup from the diesel plant sale. So the city has it within its power to move forward on this.
If that's what you choose to fund that portion, absolutely. The BLP has funding set aside for the rest of that work. Of course, it's 2 years old, those numbers, so.
Right, we got to go back and look at the
Yeah, we'll go
numbers.
back and rebid it and then come back with a number. Maybe the remediation costs, would be higher, but a year and a half ago, when I secured those numbers, they were right in the 150 range.
It seems like eventually Eagle's going to come to us and say, time to move this stuff. Laura, is that pretty accurate?
Eagle would have typically they don't have really regulations as prescriptive as the CCR when it comes to coal pile, but they have a plan, so they can easily come and ask for that plan to be executed.
So Lara, is that coal yard area potentially causing contamination? Those soils that are left?
Molly, do you want to speak on that?
Sorry, could you say that again? I missed that.
Is the coal pile or the soil around the coal pile contributing to the contamination on site?
I would say we do not have data to answer that question. It is not something that we are evaluating because it is not a regulatory requirement to evaluate coal pile impacts. Does that make sense? The coal pile is not a regulated facility.
Coal.
The ash is. Yeah, after it's burned and it's ash, then we do. So does that make sense? Does that answer?
No, it does.
It's more of the coal pile. It's more of something that would be related to stormwater. If there's any contamination, we won't be able to tell the difference if that's from coal or CCR, because the coal is not regulated. So
but But generally, I can
yeah.
tell you that generally speaking, they would have added coal piles to the regulatory requirements if, from a national perspective, it was evaluated that coal piles were contributing to contamination of groundwater as a whole. So generally speaking, it is not thought to be a significant source of, again, I'm not site specific here, just speaking generally, because if that was a significant source, the EPA would have added it to the CCR program requirements at that time.
The regulation that the coal pile would, under Part 115, so Part 115 is a waste regulation. So if you have a coal pile that stays on site for when it's not used, so as long as you're using the coal in a pile, you can have it for years. As soon as that purpose of that coal pile is done, then it can, the site can be considered a the name left me, but it's like a dump, and basically that coal pile will be considered dump. Now the coal pile has been removed. It's just now we need to make sure that the plan that we do verification and we show Eagle that the coal has been removed.
The amount, as they remove the coal during the plant demolition, they have to remove it to a certain percentage. And so the contractor that went in and removed the actual coal, it wasn't low enough because over the years, though, that coal has intermixed with the soils. And they've determined that, I think it's about, on average, about 3 feet. So it's 5%. We can have 5% or less coal left behind, and we have more than that, as that original contractor just basically scraped it flush. A different type of contractor needs to come in and dig it out. So.
Well, yeah.
So it's essentially demonstrating to Eagle that this that the coal pile has been removed through survey and through visual observation. So
what I hear is, I mean, Eagle is, at least regulates it because there could potentially be environmental impacts. And so it's something that needs to be done. And our staff, I'm recalling the timeline here, when there was this transition to HDR, did go to the BLP and asked for them to fund this work. They had concerns about, carbon filters and how, that interplayed with PFAS. And so they refused to fund that. And that's where it sounds like we continue to stay at this point. I think, maybe it's something that we can talk about at our joint meeting here next week or in a couple of weeks or something, just to see how we can move at least that portion.
It'd be nice.
So.
Honestly, I'd like to find places where we could move forward if it will advance the remediation as over time. So I think, Ryan, that's your agenda item, so maybe
That's
take
true.
that
That's
for
on my
action.
task list, yes.
Okay. Anybody,
Okay.
anything else? I think we're good, Lara.
Okay.
On to PFAS?
on to PFAS. So I'll turn it over to Wendy. I'll mute myself and I'll advance the screen. Go, Wendy.
Okay, thank you. Well, tonight I'll provide an overview of the data gap investigation work plan, describe the work that's been completed so far, and summarize the findings and the next steps. But I'll start with a quick reminder of what per and polyfluoroalkyl substances are, or PFAS. You know, they're a family of human-made chemicals that have been used for decades, and they're very stable and do not break down in the environment. There are thousands of PFAS, and each can have different health impacts associated with them. So PFAS was detected in the groundwater at Harbor Island. So some additional investigation is needed to understand the nature and extent of PFAS and the potential exposure pathways. So the scope of the data gap investigation, was to better understand where PFAS is present on Harbor Island and to look at the variability. So the scope included a PFAS investigation, which was to install and sample 4 temporary monitoring wells in the northeast portion of the island, or the soccer field portion. Sorry? Oh, I thought there was a question.
No.
Conduct vertical aquifer sampling at 40 locations across the island to fill in data gaps. And that included collecting groundwater samples at 2 depth intervals at each of the vertical aquifer sampling locations, and collect soil samples at locations where waste material was observed. And then using those results from the vertical aquifer sampling, we were going to install and survey permanent monitoring wells to look at variability in PFAS concentrations. And then additionally collect surface water samples at 6 locations. And following the PFAS investigation, there was going to be some quarterly sampling. That included collecting samples from new monitoring wells that were installed, and then 10 existing monitoring wells over 4 quarters, and collect surface water samples from stilling wells and wetland locations. And then after the completion of the quarterly sampling, prepare a PFAS investigation summary report to summarize the activities conducted during the data gap investigation, as well as the quarterly sampling activities, and provide recommendations for future activities if that was applicable. So for the work that has been completed so far, we did install and sample 4 of the temporary monitoring wells in the northeast portion of the soccer field. We conducted the vertical aquifer sampling at 40 locations in November and December of 2022 and analyzed the groundwater and soil for PFAS. Select samples were also analyzed for metals, volatile organic compounds, semi-volatile organic compounds, and to evaluate other potential non-coal combustion residual impacts. We installed 8 permanent monitoring wells and collected surface water samples at 6 locations and a sediment sample in 1 location to evaluate potential upgradient sources. We conducted the first quarterly sampling event in late January, early February of 2023. That first quarterly event was expanded to include all of the existing wells and all of the new monitoring wells to establish a full site-wide baseline. The second quarter sampling event was conducted in May of 2023, and this was more according to the work plan. So 18 monitoring wells were sampled, and we collected surface water samples from wetland locations. And the data is still being validated, so that won't be part of tonight's information. And then as far as data analysis and reporting, we've provided figures and results for the vertical aquifer sampling in the first quarterly event to communicate results with stakeholders, and looked at not only the new data, but the existing data that goes back to May 2021 to refine the conceptual site model and evaluate a path forward to meet the Renew Harbor Island goals. So I'm going to say conceptual site model a few times tonight. So I just want to kind of explain what that is. And it's basically just a living and iterative representation of a site. And it summarizes and helps to visualize and understand available information. And as I mentioned, it's a living representation, so it's updated as new information is obtained to better understand the situation at the site. So we have looked at the new data in combination with the historical data to refine the conceptual site model. And the sampling has helped us better understand the PFAS source area. Results indicate that there are widespread areas that are contributing to PFAS impacts to groundwater across the island, including the soccer field to the northeast. This figure that's shown on the slide here is from the 1993 master plan for Harbor Island and shows the different physiographic areas. The areas that are designated with the number 4 are areas that have had human alteration. And the areas that have been investigated as part of the data gap investigation are the areas that are south of that large wetland area that's designated with a number 2, and then that soccer field area as well. Yeah, that's the number 4. There you go. Thanks. So what we found is there have been fill activities across the majority of the site, between historic information that's available. This has included landfilling activities. Waste materials were observed in borings in all areas of the island that were investigated, with the exception of the former Shell location where it wasn't observed as much. To look at the potential source areas, some limited soil samples were collected as part of the data gap investigation. The samples were collected in the former power plant location and then along the northern access road that's just south of that wetland area, that number 2 wetland area. The soil did have exceedances of Michigan criteria for PFOS, which is a PFAS substance, indicating that that soil could be a potential, that fill material or waste is a potential source. And then we did observe some different PFAS concentrations that were kind of localized in certain areas that may indicate that there may be other sources, more localized sources, in addition to the widespread source that we're seeing from filling activities. So, okay, next slide. So when developing the conceptual site model, we look at exposure pathways. So the concentrations of PFOS, PFOA, and PFHXS exceed Michigan's drinking water criteria. However, there are no drinking water wells located on Harbor Island, and it appears that the drinking water wells that are located on either side of the Grand River would not be impacted just by the nature of the river. And so right now we don't think that exposure pathway is a complete pathway.
That's good news.
You can go to the next slide. So another exposure pathway results from contaminated groundwater discharging into surface water and then impacting the surface water quality. So Michigan Groundwater Surface Water Interface, or GSI criteria, are concentrations that if exceeded, you could have the potential to have negative impacts on surface water. So there is the potential for PFAS contaminated groundwater on Harbor Island to discharge both to the Grand River and to the wetlands that are located on the island. And based on the concentration in monitoring wells that are located near the edge of the island, it appears that there may be PFAS contaminated groundwater discharging to the Grand River at concentrations above the GSI criteria. There is a drinking water intake that is located in Lake Michigan that's located about 0.6 of a mile south of the mouth of the Grand River. However, it's important to note that the city tests its drinking water more frequently than Michigan regulations require, and no PFAS has been present above the Michigan drinking water criteria. So, and then you can go to the next slide. It also appears that there is the potential for PFAS contaminated groundwater to be discharging to the wetlands located on Harbor Island. So a use attainability analysis needs to be conducted to determine if those discharging concentrations would affect the wetlands designated use. So Molly talked about the groundwater being variable, and so I won't go into it too much, only to say that it's variable. It's due to the fill and the interactions with surface water. And because of this variability, the GSI pathway in general, to understand, where contaminated groundwater is discharging to surface water, needs to be further assessed because of that variability. So the data gap investigation has given us some additional data about the nature and extent of PFAS. And the following slides are focused on the exceedances of GSI criteria, because as I mentioned, we don't feel like the drinking water pathway is complete. And so those criteria exceedances won't be as important in our evaluation. But the GSI pathway, which we do think is a complete pathway, is the one I'm going to focus on when I talk about results here. So Michigan currently only has GSI criteria for 3 PFAS. That's PFOS, PFOA, and PFBS. There are exceedances of the GSI criteria on Harbor Island for PFOS and PFOA. So you can see here that PFOS has a GSI criteria of 11 parts per trillion. And the highest concentration we've seen is 290 parts per trillion. PFOA has a GSI criteria of 66 parts per trillion, and the highest concentration that we've seen is 134 parts per trillion. And then PFBS has a GSI criteria of 8,300 parts per trillion, but the highest concentration that we've seen is 66 parts per trillion, so we don't exceed the GSI criteria for PFBS. So we have as part of our groundwater analysis, we analyzed for over 32 PFAS compounds, but there are not Michigan cleanup criteria for all of them. I mentioned that there were exceedance of GSI criteria for PFOS and PFOA, and also I'll show you some figures that show those results. But I will also show you some other figures from another PFAS constituent that helps us understand potential PFAS source areas. The following figures, they show both the results for the vertical aquifer sampling that was conducted in late 2022 and the first quarter event, which occurred in late January, early February 2023. And that's because it gives us the best coverage of the island to understand that nature and extent.
And I want to mention that the slides probably is not in your packet. We just added it just to kind of summarize the data and give you a quick visual here.
Okay, so this slide here is shows the PFOS detections in groundwater. I'm hoping you can see this. It's pretty small on my screen, but so there's some gray dots there. The gray dots
right here.
Thank you, represent sampling locations where there was not a detection of PFOS. The light pink smaller dots represent locations where there were detections of PFOS. However, these detections did not exceed GSI criteria. And then the next larger dot with a yellow halo around it are locations where PFOS exceeded the GSI criteria, and those go from the criteria up to 110 parts per trillion. And then the largest pink dot with the halo are locations where it exceeded 110 parts per trillion. And like I said, the highest isn't much higher than that. So, but what you can see here is that the PFOS concentrations, while there are higher concentrations that are located kind of on the former power plant location and along that northern access road there, there are detections across the island. So a lot of that is likely at least a portion of that is likely tied to those filling activities, although there may be some more localized contributions to those concentrations as well. So this figure shows the PFOA detections. Again, it's the same kind of breakdown. The gray dots are locations where there were not a PFOA detection. The light green are locations where it did not exceed criteria. The next size up with the yellow halo are where they exceeded criteria up to 110 parts per trillion. And then I think there's maybe one location that is shown that is above 110 parts per trillion. So again, with the PFOA, you can see there are detections across the island, with the highest ones being again in that former power plant location and along the northern access road there. Oh, and I should mention too, and I should have said this on PFOS as well, there were higher detections also in the soccer field that exceeded. So most of the investigation so far has been focused on the other portion of the island, but we did get some exceedances of that GSI criteria of both PFOS and PFOA in the soccer field as well. So this figure I wanted to show because although it tells us a little bit about source areas. So the other two figures I showed you, there were detections, while they were higher in certain areas, there were detections across the island. But this figure shows 6,2-fluorotelomere sulfonic acid, or 6,2-FTS. And 6,2-FTS, it does not have a Michigan cleanup criteria, but we see that the detections are all located along kind of on the western side, with the highest detections being in the former power plant location. And it's good to mention this because 6.2 FTS is a little different than like PFOS and PFOA because it is manufactured using a process called fluorotelomerization, and that process wasn't developed until the 1990s. So that was after the island stopped accepting waste in 1970s. So it just tells us something about there could be potentially some other sources here. And then the last figure here is just to give an overview of the impact of total PFAS. So each of those locations, as I mentioned earlier, we analyzed for over 32 PFAS. So we summed the total concentrations of each of those constituents to show the distribution across the island. So you can see that the highest, again, the highest concentrations are in the former power plant area and then along that northern access road as well. The next step here is to prepare the data gap investigation report to summarize the findings, you know, the nature and extent of the PFAS, the variability that we've seen. We'll look at both the data that we have collected and put that together with the other historical data and use that to make some decisions on what needs to be done next and what we found. And then following that, we'll prepare a remedial investigation work plan that will focus on the GSI pathway to better understand that groundwater flow variability, to understand where and what concentrations PFAS contaminated water is discharging to surface water. And that helps us determine some remedial alternatives that make sense in conjunction with the CCR program there.
Okay. So the next, our next step is to, we have a town hall that's planned for August, September, and by that time we'll have the data investigation or the data gap report will be completed, and we can share more of the May data. And by that time we'll have we'll finish our last sampling event for the background, and we'll be kind of have a little bit more information. We'll have a CAG meetings and in the fall. We just had one last week, and then obviously these updates, and then our next update to the City Council and BLP will be in September, depending on when that town hall meeting would be. So, any questions for the PFAS?
When you test areas and it doesn't show that it's above regulated criteria, does that mean that area won't need cleanup? Because it sounds like there were areas you've kind of ruled out, these are below.
Yeah, it depends on how the, you know, what we decided makes the most sense for remedial alternatives. But yeah, we will be focusing on that GSI pathway and determining, you know, what we need to do to prevent groundwater from that contaminated groundwater from discharging into the surface water.
Okay, thank you.
So this 6.2 FTS, that's something that's, as I understand it, kind of breaks down into, or it can be break down into, and I don't know the technical language, so correct me, please, into like PFOS or some other PFAS compound?
PFOA, but I'll let Matt answer that. He's better with it.
Yes, it does break down. Basically, FTS will break down into what are called perfluorinated alkyl acids, which are terminal and stable in the environment. And basically, PFOA, for example, it has 6 carbon chains, so it's not going to gain carbon chains. And when it breaks down into these PFAAs, it actually will stay the same, or it'll lose a couple carbon chains. So it'll break down into unregulated at this time compounds, but that are kind of in terminal form. So it'll break down into PF hexa, PF PEA, and PFBA.
Okay. And So that's something that you're testing. And for the folks that are following along, I think this presentation is going to be made available to the public, and you'll be able to see these maps, which when you can see them up close, they do tell, very interesting to look at, we'll say that. So this 6.2 FTS is what's being found in, in various portions of the SIM site, correct?
Yes, right here.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think this is, good information for, our two joint boards to discuss. What I think what the map show and what, you've indicated is that, once again, we're seeing that at least the highest concentrations at this point of all of the PFAS is showing up in the SIM site. And I raise that not, to blame anybody, because I think we're hearing that, we're still figuring out the source, and certainly the fill is probably a portion of that. But it looks like there might be some site-specific concern that's being investigated on the actual SIM site itself. And so, I'm going to say it here because I said it at our last meeting. I want to say it at our joint meeting that, we're asking our partners at the Board of Light and Power to truly partner on sharing the PFAS investigation costs. They've refused to participate in the cost to at least investigate these matters on a site that they controlled for several years, and we're hearing this 6.2 FTS, that they're testing is, came about in the 90s, so well after the dump closed. So it's not from the trash materials, and so again, it's about a partnership and sharing the costs, because it's expensive to do all this testing and have these fantastic consultants do this work. So I'm hopeful that we can still get to that point where we're at least sharing in those costs, and perhaps we can have further discussion with some of the data that's kind of come along. So that's all I have.
Anybody else?
Laura, you have quarterly meetings with Eagle?
They're not quarterly meetings. We had the council was organizing the meetings for the ACO, but we have not had one since February, I said. So they're not regular meeting. We have quarterly reports that we submit to Eagle, and we have communication with Eagle fairly often. I mean, if we have a question but the reports are quarterly submitted to Eagle.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Karen, you got anything? Ashley?
Just to be clear, the quarterly reports submitted to Eagle are on the CCR side of things, not
Correct.
with regard to the PFAS results.
Correct.
Good. Thank you very much, Laura and team. Every time I hear it, I pick up a little more. And this was a lot more detail, I think, than we got last time, so it was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
People good?
Yeah.
I'll have to listen to that one again.
Okay, we're going to move on. And believe it or not, actually, at this point, we need a motion to approve the consent and regular agendas.
So moved.
And second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to move item 11H from the consent agenda.
Sorry, say it again, Karen.
I'd like to move 11H from the consent agenda to new business, 13D.
Okay, any discussion on that? Everybody okay with that? Would you please?
Is there a second for that?
Yeah, is there a second?
Second.
Mike, were you seconding or you had a question?
No, I was going to second it.
Okay, that's fine.
Doesn't matter.
Can we call the roll, please, Maria?
Lowe?
Is
This
this
is
on
for
the
the
amendment?
amendment.
This is
yes.
to amend, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
McLaughlin?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
McNally?
Yes. Okay, so now, we need a motion to approve the consent and regular agendas as amended.
Now it goes back to the original motion.
Okay,
As
that's fine.
amended.
Yep, as amended. And we've already got a motion. Yep, go.
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. Okay. So at this point, we're going to do first call to the audience. It's one of two opportunities in the meeting. In addition to, there's a public hearing at this meeting. If you want to talk about the subject of the public hearing, I'm going to ask if you would, that you wait and do it during the public hearing. But otherwise, at this time, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address and will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. Those not physically present who would like to call in may dial 616-935-3203. If it continues ringing, please remain on the line until your turn. We will take all callers. Jim?
Yes, Jim Hagan, 400 Lake. I'm a member of the Citizens Advisory Group on Harbor Island, so I was able to see the presentations in advance. And I just wanted to share with you some of the questions I had regarding what I saw, and I think it's pretty much what you saw tonight. The first one I had was on the options report, remedial options report. So I asked whether it would include economic data, and they said, no, they're not able to include economic data in that report, but they could produce another report that had economics. So I would urge the city to make sure that, parallel report is produced, because the state and apparently the EPA prohibit the economic data from appearing in the other report. The other item, I'm going to read it to you. When I saw the new compound, the 6.2 FTS, I was surprised because I hadn't seen it and I didn't know what it was about. So being a chemical engineer, I looked it up and found out it was a non-regulated compound versus the regulated compounds that are known as forever chemicals. So I sent HDR an email saying, I just pulled up some information on 6.2 FTS, and it has much different biotoxicity, persistence, and bioaccumulation properties than the regulated PFAS and PFAS chemicals, and sent them the link. I said, care needs to be taken to explain all of this. I'm afraid the average person will consider it as toxic, persistent, et cetera, as the regulated substances, which it is not. I believe most people seeing the presentation will not realize the differences, which will only add to the more confusion within the public. I think they clarified some of it, but the response I got back was, thank you, Jim. For clarification, 6.2 FTS is toxic, as shown in your graphic, but not as toxic, bioaccumulative, or environmentally persistent as PFAS. And 6.2 FTS is not regulated by Michigan Eagle or US EPA. The PFAS that are regulated have extensive toxicological data. So I'm bringing this up because there are regulated chemicals and there are not regulated chemicals. Companies do not go after non-regulated chemicals and clean them off. This particular chemical is not like the PFAS. It is not a forever chemical. It has breakdown properties. It's not bioaccumulative. It doesn't accumulate in fats like the forever chemicals do. So I think this is just a very important thing for you and the public to realize that there's 5,000 PFASs, and I believe only 7 of them are regulated. So we have to be very careful on how the data is presented and how the cleanup plans are developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Good evening. My name is Cecil Bradshaw, and I live at 31 Sherman Avenue. And I want to speak to the diesel plant, and this is not in regard to the public hearing coming up. There's some issues that are somewhat troubling to me, and they may not be an issue at all, but I was looking at the previous Planning Commission meeting minutes, and part of it was the developer was asked about the tenants. And the developer responded that, that there's two tenants that they were considering at that time. One had not come back in. And then at that meeting, he was identified that the offices were not included in that particular presentation because they weren't needed for parking requirements. Well, in the news release this last week, it says there will be office space. And also, in parking issues, Ingers noted that the tenants would be responsible for parking and would need to institute creativity. So the implication is that there would be more than one tenant. And in the Waterfront 2 district, you're only allowed one tenant in a commercial building. And so I think that that's a problem if there's more than one tenant that is being entertained for this building. In regards to the parking, I was really disappointed that the developer did not have any concrete answers for parking. It was loosey-goosey. For instance, Ingers responded that Harbor Transit providing shuttle service conversation is still ongoing. Now, public service, it ends at 6 o'clock Monday through Friday. It ends at 4 o'clock on Saturday. It ends at 12:30 on Sunday. I think most events are after that time. And at a time that a few years ago, when I hosted a convention, and I talked to the folks at Harbor Transit, it was identified that we cannot schedule things for private events such as that. It is a public service transportation. So this is a little troubling to me that that's being considered. The other part regarding parking is that Akers noted there's no confirmation of lease tenure with the water treatment plant. Ingers noted there's still final details to work out with Knowles regarding a surge of peak parking during demand off-peak season. I find it troubling that the city would be negotiating with a private developer to provide parking that is probably public parking, to lease those parking places to enable them to have parking where in fact they do not have enough parking based on the city ordinances. It just blows my mind that this would be going on in this city. The city negotiating additional lease parking spaces on their property so the developer would come closer to meeting the requirements, but still does not. So in conclusion on this, the troubling part is, I said there's just a lot of loosey-goosey elements of this development, and it concerns me that codes and ordinances developed over the years to protect the citizens of Grand Haven are not being followed by city administration and legislative code body. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil.
My name is Pete Stalzer, 7075 Bowman Drive, Middle Michigan. I am on tonight's agenda. Good evening, everyone. My name is Pete Pedro Stalzer. I'm the host of Pedro's Pig Roast that has been held on City Beach in Grand Haven, Michigan since 1991. We started as a creative group of local individuals who either lived here or are associated with family being brought up in the area. The event started as a pass the hat party. This helped us defer our expenses, and we were always open to the public. We contacted the city every year and followed the guidelines provided and was always approved for our event. In 2007, there were new requirements put in place in which permits had to be obtained, as well as liability insurance to be compliant within the city guidelines. With these guidelines provided, we basically became a one-day vendor that allowed us to charge for food during the event. We didn't like that idea, and basically it was decided if we're gonna go do all this stuff, we wanted to do something nice for people in need as a nonprofit fundraiser for the community. To accomplish this goal, we set a parameter in which we would put up the money for the event, and once we would have half the expenses collected, we would donate the rest. We did it this way since we do not seek, nor do we wish any corporate sponsorship. We want to show what people can do in the community on their own with some creativity and effort. Under this concept, we've been able to raise between $1,500 and $2,000 yearly for local charities in the area. These charities include Senior Meals on Wheels in Grand Haven, the Little Red House in Spring Lake, and now the Momentum Center in Grand Haven. Each of these nonprofit charities provide critical services in our community, and we are proud to be able to contribute to these causes. Our goal is a simple one, is to provide an event that is a true reflection of the community. We want everyone to enjoy it. We want to make it available for everybody of all ages to attend. We want to make sure it's a positive reflection of Grand Haven and its residents. And most of all, extend a helping hand to those in need of those services. We're not a tourist attraction. We're a long-standing local event that focuses on the fun line, not the bottom line. It's not a contest to see how much money we can raise. It's about a positive, fun, well-thought-out event that helps the community. We do not charge for our event. We accept donations, and we are successful because of the dedication of our volunteers and the generosity of our attendees. We also believe that city parks can be a positive resource for the community and providing not only an area to say, I do, but we can as well. There are many examples where parks have fundraisers and other local events to help bring community together and make a positive impact for its citizens. In closing, there is a saying, individuals do not make the world go round, people do. And with your approval, on August 19th, 2023, the 30th annual Pedro's Pig Roast will fully encapsulate that thought process and bring an event to the Grand Haven City Beach for all of us to enjoy and benefit people in need. We always appreciate your time. We appreciate the support, being able to review our application and make some consideration on fees for the beach and stuff like that. I know we're not a nonprofit 503c or whatever it's, but we operate one, and that's how we run our event. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
My name is Bob Smith. I live in Ferrysburg, 17537 Park Place, and I promise not to say PFAS or FTS. Just a short comment on the power plant project. It's just a suggestion of mine, and I've made it elsewhere, but I'm kind of a two birds with one stone kind of person, and a multi-level parking facility with a destination restaurant on top with a view would probably be a pretty nice idea. That parking space next to the building, and there are some people that would like to see the facade of that building retained. I don't know how to work that in. I'm not an architect, but that parking down there would service both the beach and the downtown, and a restaurant on top would be a great destination. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Doug Vance, 100 Washington. I'm not a scientist or a geologist or whatever those names were, but in the presentation, just as a thought, I saw the word lithium. I've been reading a little bit about lithium lately, and the thought just occurred to me is how much lithium is there, and is it harvestable? And if it is, it can be sold. Just a thought. Again, I'm no expert on it, so I doubt it's enough to be, but just a thought. I received in the mail this week from my, call it my landlord. I have a lease with an option to purchase 100 Washington that I've been sitting on for the last 6 years. And I received an invoice from him that was sent to him by the city for maintenance of the heated sidewalks. We're the 5th largest assessment. In the presentation, I heard that there is funding available because of the sale of the old power plant. I don't know if you folks realize it or not, but it is very difficult to sustain a business downtown, small business such as we have. A few weeks ago, you increased the millage by 0.5, which adds about $2,000 to my tax bill. This adds $2,000 to a bill that is new. Turn it off. You know, I'm being assessed for 47 feet. I don't know what that amounts to. I noticed that 300 Washington isn't even on here, and they have more footage on that's heated than I do, and they're not even on the assessment roll. So my question would be, how was this assessment put together? And it just says, you know, here's your fair share. Well, how was that determined? Especially if there's properties, and I haven't analyzed all the properties here, but you know, what ones weren't assessed and why. And you know, I have to shovel off our back patio, our sidewalk, which the city plows occasionally. We take care of that before they ever get to it. I get the backs against the alleyway, I get that cleared off so that people coming to our restaurant don't have to walk through the snow. Doing an extra 47 feet in front would be no big deal. Not to mention the fact that it would be, if you're gonna assess it by square footage. We have this big flower pot in front of our place that I'm told I can't put any chairs or anything out there because that's there. Well, then why am I being assessed to clear it when it's not even part of the sidewalk? Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Hi, Steve Miller, 1540 Benoyer Avenue. The good news that I'd like to start out with is that I think that the recent land use decisions that the City Council has made have been good decisions. And it is in the spirit of those past decisions that I come to you with a real concern. I recently found out that this city intends to widen Howard Street, apparently this September. And I want to protest this decision, but before I can do that, I feel that I have a responsibility to do some research. And I would like to find out if the city actually has an official rationale that the city has formulated that for this decision that would be available to all the citizens. And to further that process, I will be sending my email address, my phone number to the council members and Ashley, because I feel that that is incumbent on me to first determine fully and authoritatively all of the reasons that the city has assembled for this decision to widen Howard Street. I don't think it's a good decision, but I'll also say I have talked to residents on the street, and to the best of my knowledge, none of the residents on that street have ever heard an official explanation for that decision. Thank you.
Danielle Martin, 14201 128th Avenue in Grand Haven. I'm an employee of the Board of Light and Power, but speaking today just as an individual, sharing just my personal opinion. The BLP CCC recently submitted signatures to have a proposed charter amendment placed on the November ballot. When the time comes for the community to vote on this item, the public deserves to be accurately informed about the impact this change could have on current BLP employees. On its website, the BLP CCC makes promises regarding the employees that it will have no authority to keep. Their homepage states that if approved, the amendment would, quote, keep employee wages and benefits, including pension benefits, in the new department as they currently exist. I ask where this statement is found within the amendment. The only line I can find states that initial compensation of employees shall continue. The proposal does not specify what is included in initial compensation. Is that salary and benefits? It also does not define how long the initial compensation shall continue for. It just says it shall continue. The fact is, if the transition happens, wages and benefits will be set by City Council. The BLP CCC should not mislead the public by saying on Council's behalf that nothing will change. How can the public be accurately informed when the BLP CCC website contains contradictions, stating on its homepage that all current BLP employees will transfer to the new department, but then stating on the FAQ page that it's likely there will be some savings to ratepayers and a reduction of a few management positions? Which one is it? And more importantly, whose decision will this be? The BLP CCC has no authority to guarantee any employee positions will continue outside of the initial period referenced in the amendment. In making the statement, they are again speaking on Council's behalf regarding a decision only Council will have the authority to make. By stating all current BLP employees will transfer to the new department, the BLP CCC is again making a commitment it has no ability to keep, this time on behalf of the current employees. Has the BLP CCC spoken with each individual employee and asked if they would transfer to the new department? They do not know if any employees would seek other work or make the decision to retire should the amendment pass. As an employee, I do not want the BLP CCC speaking on my behalf, and I encourage City Council to put a stop to them speaking on yours.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay.
I'm Dave Clausen, 19 Sherman Avenue in Grand Haven. We have some concerns about the power plant, and we saw in the Chronicle and the Grand Rapids Press that the papers were signed, but I'm concerned, as many other people, about a tax abatement. And in discussion the last couple days with some of our neighbors and also other interested parties, I came across Dave Tengate, who owns Capstone. And I would like to have this as a matter of record. To whom it may concern at the Grand Haven City Clerk's office, I just learned the City Council seems poised to vote on a 12-year tax abatement for the diesel plant development. Neither I nor my business partner are able to attend this meeting, so I've asked someone else to represent it. My business partner and I offered to purchase the former diesel plant property for $1 million, more than the current owner eventually paid for the property. The city accepted the price hit, presumably based on a poorly written survey to which is a whopping 7% of city residents responding in order to be principled. We would argue, however, that the city, which cannot afford to trim its own trees or clean up the environment contamination on Harbor Island or fund its pension liabilities, cannot afford such a luxury by giving this a tax abatement. We've learned today that the council is now considering this abatement, and we are just stating that we would like you to reconsider that. If Capstone's proposal had been accepted, our development concept would have been added at least another $4,200,000 in taxable value to the city tax base. At 52 mills, that would amount to over $218,000 in additional tax. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, moving on. I wonder if I could get a motion to, let's get, Maria, will you move the read the consent agenda first?
Item A, approval of regular council meeting minutes of May 1, May 15, and June 5, 2023, and special work session meeting minutes of May 15. B, approve the bills memo in the amount of $1,004,168. C, approve a special event request to hold Pedro's Pig Roast at Grand Haven City Beach on Saturday, August 19, 2023, from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. and waive the sound ordinance. D, approve a special event request to hold Rotary Divine event at Chinook Pier on Thursday, June 29, 2023, from 5 p.m. until 9 p.m., allowing alcohol to be sold and served during event hours, waiver of the sound ordinance, and apply up to a $500 discount to the rental fee as outlined in the City of Grand Haven's special event policy. Item E, approve a community service fund letter agreement between the City of Grand Haven and the Grand Haven Area Community Foundation, establishing a temporary community service fund to be utilized for ecosystem restoration as outlined within the city-approved forest management plan, and authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the necessary documents. Item F, accept the proposal from Jackson Murphy Contractors of Muskegon, Michigan, and the not-to-exceed amount of $744,892.50 for the Industrial Drive Lift Station Reconstruction Project, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Item G, approve a resolution recognizing Kenzie's Bee Cafe as a nonprofit organization operating in the City of Grand Haven for the purpose of obtaining a charitable gaming license for the state of Michigan. Item H has been
Hold
moved
up,
to new.
we pulled H, right?
Yep, I'm saying it's been moved
Oh,
to
yep.
new business.
Sorry. Go ahead, Marie. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll support it.
Motion by Lowe, support by Fritz. We'll call the roll.
I'd like to say a
Oh,
few
go
words,
ahead.
if there's any comment you don't mind. Last year, Pete, thank you for being here and your kind words you said there today, earlier, but last year we had a lot of decisions to make when he was here, and I went out there and went to that event, and I'm telling you what, it was very well family-orientated. It was so much fun. It's been a long time since I was there, but it was just a great event. So I want to say thank you, Pete, for all your hard work on that and coming through with it. And it's actually a donation to the Momentum Center. As they're moving, it'd be a great thing to do too, because they're moving into a new building and they could use an influx of. So anybody that's out there, it'd be nice if you went out there and make a donation and you know it's going to a good cause and have a good time, because it's a party on the beach and it's just, you have to experience it to understand what it's all about. So also the Divine event, I like to talk about the Chinook Pier they're having down there. That's another good event also. It's a fundraiser they're going to be using for, I think it's for, is it special needs at Ferry School or some sort like that?
I think, yeah, it's,
They're doing, it's a fundraiser for that also. So anybody that's interested in that, the tickets are out there from the Rotary Club. Be glad to get out there and help support them also, because
I
it's.
think the Divine event is split between Fair School needs and a Honduras water
Yes.
project. Yeah,
That's
through
awesome.
Rotary.
So that's another great event. So those are the only things I want to just shout out to make sure people get out there and help support them.
Okay, Mike, thanks. We got anything else? Please call the roll.
Lowe,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. Okay, item 12A, I'm going to open a public hearing regarding establishing an obsolete property rehabilitation district at 518 South Harbor Drive, and establish a finding that it is an obsolete property in an area characterized by obsolete commercial or commercial housing property. The public hearing is open for anyone who'd like to make comment. Brian, it's going to go first.
I'll introduce it. Brian Urquhart, City Planner. As council is aware, the property received site plan approval, special land use approval, satisfying all local government approvals per the buy-sell agreement, and it was sold in May. We closed on it in May. And subsequently, developer has asked for utilizing obsolete property rehabilitation district, that state program for tax abatement. And Elizabeth Butler of the Chamber has supplied a letter to first do, this is the first of two steps, is this new property description that is what was purchased, is to establish that district. If you recall, there has been two occasions where the city has approved a district, that most recently at 300 North 7th Street, and then the Crescent Building at 1103 Washington. That one did receive a certificate. So there has been past precedent. So I'm just introducing how we kind of got here with the request to establish an obsolete property district. There's no, tonight there is no ask for a tax abatement. That would be step two. So I know Elizabeth is here, and I believe that members of Grand Power Works are here to help explain as well their requests. So I'll leave it up to them.
My name is Carol LaCoe. I live at 78 Grand Avenue here in Grand Haven, and I'd also like to talk about the obsolescence proposal. A few years back, the city asked us by way of a survey included in our water bill if we wanted to preserve the BLP diesel plant on Harbor Drive. 43% said yes, save the building. What we weren't asked is, by how much are we willing to discount the property to save the building? Here's the survey. If any of you would like to look at it, you will find that there are no financials. It's kind of like going to a restaurant and getting a menu with no prices. You can see what's available, and you can order what you like, But until your server hands you your bill, you have no idea what you'll be expected to pay. We residents weren't asked if we were willing to discount the price of the property by $1 million. But that's what happened. Grand Power Works bought this site for $1 million less than what another developer was willing to pay. That's a big give. At any rate, the deal with Grand Power Works was finalized last month, and tonight the Chamber of Commerce is asking you to declare this site obsolete. Yep, you're going to be asked to declare this historic site an obsolete property rehabilitation district. Declaring the former BLP site obsolete would let Grand Power Works apply for a tax abatement of up to 12 years, conceivably avoiding taxes in excess of the $1 million purchase price. I can appreciate that the Chamber of Commerce wants to help Grand Power Works succeed. And I can appreciate that you do too. All of you have put a lot of thought, time, and effort into this project. But this ask is coming at a very bad time. The city needs money to clean up Harbor Island and fund the pension. The Grand Haven area public schools are asking for more money too. Oh, and did I mention we just got a tax increase of $500,000? As much as you may want to help Grand Power Works, I think this one more request is one you should say no to. You've already given Grand Power Works a real deal price-wise, half what Capstone offered, and you've given Grand Power Works a variance on the setback, help with parking, permission to add condos, and time, and still more time to ink this deal. And the thanks we're given for our generosity is a request for more money in the form of a property tax freeze. Don't do it. Don't give Grand Power Works any more money. It's time the Grand Power Works to start taking responsibility for the deal it made, not to shake down taxpayers for still more money in the form of a tax break. If Grand Power Works doesn't like the deal, well, no one held a gun to their heads, right? And if Grand Power Works can't keep its end of the deal, of the bargain, it can sell the property to a developer that can.
Thank you, Carol.
My name is Cecil Bradshaw, and I live at 31 Sherman Avenue here in Grand Haven. And I see that a copy of Act 146 of 2000, the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation District, was not included in your packet for tonight's meeting. It is 9 pages long. It's right here. Relatively complex in terms of data that's got to be analyzed before you can make a decision. My hope is that you have read it, analyzed it, and adopted an objective position on the request. To start out by selecting this project over another proposed project, the city leaders have already foregone at least $6,109,000 over a period of 10 years. $1,125,000 on the original purchase, $3,864,000 construction economic impact, $1,120,000 in real estate taxes. Now they're back. They want another $1 million. And I think that that is wrong. That 43%, by the way, of that 43%, that only was of 7% of the city of Grand Haven. It wasn't even a valid response. Anyway, going on. I'm going to read Public Act. You have it in its entirety. It's a qualified local government unit by resolution of its legislature body may establish one or more obsolete property rehabilitation districts that may consist of one or more parcels or tracts of land or a portion of a parcel or tract of land. If at the time the resolution is adopted, the parcel or tract of land or portion or parcel or tract of land within the district is either of the following, and you have selected the obsolete property in an area characterized by obsolete commercial property. It starts out by saying a qualified local government. When you look at the first page of the Act, it identifies a qualified government body. And when I look at what a qualified government body is, we don't meet that criteria. I do not believe we meet the criteria. If I were a city council person, I would want to see the data. I would want to know that I was doing something based on data that said we can legally do this. Secondly,
Cecil, can I just interrupt for a second and tell you that I looked at that, and Grand Haven has this authority.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm sorry, I'm wrong on that then. Now, moving on to the area. So I looked at the definition of an area. We have, our area is a district. A district is an area that is established based on certain criteria and characteristics of that neighborhood. And so right now, my understanding is that the diesel plant is in Waterfront 2. That is a zoning district. I don't believe that you can change a zoning district for one parcel without going through the planning commission and so on and so forth. I do not believe you can do that. That would be called spot zoning. And when I was on the planning commission, spot zoning was avoided at all costs. That's what this would be. Thirdly, I cannot believe any one of you would stand up publicly and say the Waterfront 2 district is an area of distressed buildings or obsolete commercial buildings or commercial housings. I cannot believe any of you would get up there and say that, and for that, we're going to give them another $1 million. I got to say, you have to say no to this resolution. You just have to. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil.
Good evening. Elizabeth Butler, Director of Economic Development Strategic Directions at the Chamber of Commerce of Grand Haven, Spring Lake, and Ferrysburg. I am the economic developer for the city of Grand Haven. On behalf of the developers at 518 South Harbor, I'm here to talk about the creation of the Oprah district at the former diesel plant. This parcel is an abandoned industrial building near our waterfront, and it would be more suited for a commercial use. Oprah's frees the taxable value, with the exception of the schools operating and the state education tax, for a period of up to 12 years. Environmental cleanup must be paid by the developer, and therefore it is often accompanied by incentives. The goal is to increase the commercial activity, create employment, and revitalize the area while cleaning up a brownfield site. The former BLP site has unusual obstacles and costs associated with the reuse of the structure. We want this site to be remediated, redeveloped, adding to the commercial vibrancy of the city and on the tax rolls for the future. Tonight, we're here to talk about step one, which is the creation of the district. After the district is created, the property owner may at that point apply for the obsolete property rehabilitation exemption. The application will include all the specifics at that point of the project. It's a complex redevelopment, as you know, so a Brandt from CL is here to share or answer any questions that you may have about this district.
You guys got questions?
It's a public hearing.
Okay. Jim?
Yes, Jim Hagan, 400 Lake. And the title of my talk is going to be Vote No to Another Sweetheart Developer Deal. Mayor and Council, tonight you are being asked to vote on declaring the old diesel plant an obsolete property rehabilitation district for the purpose of allowing Grand Power Works LLC to apply for a tax freeze of up to 12 years. Vote no. Don't put the ball in motion for another sweetheart deal. We, the taxpayers, are being faced with unprecedented costs, including approximately $30 million unfunded pension liabilities, $40 to $60 million in Harbor Island cleanup, not to mention an additional $500,000 of property tax, and the likely possibility of another $1 million, especially if we're going to have to pick up the tab for a business that now says it won't be able to fund a project. They presumably had a business plan. Did you see a pro forma? I didn't. I think that's a good question. Did anybody see their pro forma? They are now the owners of the site. It's time for them to execute the project and not come back to the well for more breaks. The residents and small businesses are paying enough in taxes. A new business on the river should not need to be subsidized by the city. If they now feel they can't do the project, it's time to sell and turn over the site to a developer who has a profitable project which will pay their full share of taxes. The agenda packet had no financial backup on the implications of a tax break. This lack of information puts the city council at a disadvantage. If you vote no, you look like you're not on board with the project, when in reality, a no vote is just telling the developer to live up to the deal. In order to present a clearer picture, a simplified tax picture and comparison for the various project scenarios has been developed and is presented in the attached document, which you all have. My numbers actually showed a $1.8 million difference, but I did not include the tax, or the taxes weren't excluded, so it's probably closer to the million. And remember, the city has real future costs. If there's a tax freeze, the other taxpayers, including our Main Street businesses, will be forced to help close the gap, and we'll all pay higher taxes with the exception of the sweetheart beneficiary. If the current developer wants to sell as a result of not getting a tax freeze, they can. The tax summary illustrates how a 16-unit condo project could increase tax revenue by about 2.5 times that of the current project at a non-abated tax rate and about 16.2 times at a reduced tax rate. It's actually lower because I guess they have to pay school taxes. But there's huge differences between the proposed project and what a condo project would do. And I completely agree with Ms. Lecoux that this was not explained at all when the survey was sent out. In fact, it had 6 pictures and asked people to just check a box. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brant Cohen with Grand Power Works. My address is Illinois. So I just happy to answer any questions that you guys may have, unless you would prefer more community comment and then me to come up.
I think we'll finish the community comment.
Okay.
Good evening. Jacob Welch, 625 Franklin Avenue. And so I'm a big student of history. Ask any of the social studies teachers at Grand Haven High School, and they'll say that I've perpetually been in their classroom, much to their dislike. But I've always been a big proponent of conservation and remembering our roots. And to me, this proposal will combine a progressive approach to Grand Haven's growth while maintaining our beautiful buildings. It is the prerogative of government to provide economic incentives and promote our growth. And the revenue this will generate in future years will definitely be worth it. And those future years, I'll be here. And this is just beyond the building itself and more on a grand scale. I'd like to offer a different perspective from the first public comment where a lot of people were saying about parking. And I don't think we need more parking downtown. We've got enough lots in downtown Grand Haven already, and maybe I'll even argue a little bit too many, but I don't want to be too radical here. And we also have to consider there's parking further east too. And so when it becomes a question of what to do with property downtown, this is valuable land that we could use for different projects that rejuvenate and bring life into these areas. And not to say we don't already have life downtown Grand Haven, I'm sure you all know we do, but there's just a lot of opportunity here. And we have an amazing public transport service, and whenever possible, we should encourage use of that service. I rode Harbor Transit around a lot when I was in high school, and I still try to make a point to do that. And I could continue and talk about the detrimental effect that cars have on our communities and all this stuff environmentally, but we should just, I like this proposal, and I think other voters will too, especially from my generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Mayor, I'd just like to offer one point of clarification as well, because there isn't a specific request before you tonight. It was staff's perspective that if this district were to be identified or approved specifically for this facility, upon receipt of the request from the developer, which would come back before you, a complete financial analysis would be completed and included in the packet, including a review of their pro forma and so forth. Just because there wasn't a specific request for you this evening, it was challenging to provide a very specific analysis. So that our intention would be, if this were approved and an actual request were submitted for your review, that analysis would be brought to you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment? All right, then I'm going to close the public hearing. I got a couple questions, and I'm guessing maybe you do as well. Karen, have you got some?
Should we put something on the floor to discuss or ask questions?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Can I get a motion? Where are we?
12C.
12C, would you read it for us, please, Maria?
Consideration by City Council of a resolution to establish an obsolete property rehabilitation district at 518 South Harbor Drive and to establish a finding that it is an obsolete property in an area characterized by obsolete commercial property or commercial housing property pursuant to Section 31A of the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, PA 146 of 2000. Administration recommends approval.
Okay, is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And is there support?
I'll second it so we can have some discussion.
Okay. You want to start, Ryan?
Yeah, that's fine. So Ashley, to your point that you were just making there, it confused me a little bit because my understanding is that there either has to be, we either establish this on our own initiative or 50% of the ownership of a particular parcel would approach the city and ask us to establish a district. So have the developers approached us asking for this, or is this something that staff is bringing to us for the city council to establish on our own?
Well, I think it's essentially a combination of those two. I think both are accurate. However, my point in my previous comment was that this consideration tonight is specifically to identify the site as eligible for that incentive. In the applicant, it would still be upon them to apply, and the application would come before you.
But I think Ryan's question is a good one, which is, it comes to us one of two ways. So one is, you brought this on your own initiative.
It was from the development team.
There was a request, but we
Yes.
didn't see a request from the development team,
The
right?
request is the chamber on behalf of the development team.
Yes, that's correct. So we had the conversations, and so I brought that forward to the city.
So we don't have a request from the developer.
The request-
And we don't, now, you can look at Elizabeth in one of two ways, because she is our contracted economic development consultant. So it could be that she brought it to us and the staff gave it to us as part of the, as part of her role as a city consultant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that
And
makes
it
total
does-
sense to
It
me.
does
but-
kind of cloud one of the issues.
So I guess the question would be, assuming that you were acting on behalf of the city in your capacity and having the economic development role that you have, did the developer submit to you a written request by at least 50% of the owners to establish this district?
My understanding is that the developer, the Grand Power Works is the owner. So yes, they meet the 50% threshold for that parcel. And this part, Oprah, the way we brought this one forward is similar to the one we did on 7th Street and similar to the way we did the Beech Tree Commercial Rehabilitation District. So I was acting on behalf of the city to bring that forward.
So do you have a written request from the developer? Because if you did, I would like to see that, and I would think the developer would explain their position, which I would be very interested in. Was there a written request from the developer? That's the only question I got.
We have, I believe we have emails with this in. We have had more conversations than emails.
The reason why I'm asking is that the statute's pretty specific, I believe, as far as how this can, how it gets to us for a decision. And there's a couple of different paths that we've covered. And so if it's not clear that we have a written request from the developer for this, then we either have to.
The question is, how is it before us?
Right. And so then we have to evaluate, okay, is this something that we're going to do on our own initiative, or are we going to wait for a written request and evaluate it at that time? That's just to establish a district. I understand there's a separate application process for, actually saying yes to a particular certificate.
So Brant did remind me that he did submit this in some of the correspondence that we had had.
That, I think, yeah, I agree with the mayor. I think it would be, I'd like to see that before probably further considering, this. We have a little more detail as far as some of the, reasoning, and I understand that there's a belief that it meets the statute, that it's functionally obsolete, it meets, that particular definition but
And I wanted to clarify a point that Cecil made, which was that we're looking at declaring only the individual property its own district. It would not in any way change zoning or in any way reflect on the rest of the properties in the area. That is the ask before us. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but that's the request. So you can designate an individual property.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay.
Has the developer, after we had the closing, this is either to Brian or Ashley, has the developer had any discussions with you about this, or is it just with the chamber? Have they come in and actually talked to us?
I can't speak for Brian, but as for myself, I believe it's been through the chamber directly. I haven't had a conversation with them after closing.
Okay. And my general sense when we talked, but before we closed on this, we talked to the developer early on, and Kevin, I remember you asking very specifically, what else are you going to need from us? And the answer was, we should be able to get state historic money, we should be able to get state economic development money, we should be able to get state environmental cleanup money, though I understand now the developer's talking about coming to our board. So I'm somewhat skeptical overall about how this is shaking out, one step at a time. So
Yeah.
what do you got?
Well, yes, and so that was early on in the project as we were assessing what was on the field for what we thought we could accomplish. We pursued historic tax credit as far as we could go, and the process to apply for a historic tax credit would be to list the building individually on the National Register, which would take at least a year and a half to go through to be able to start to qualify for that. And the conditions that are put on historic tax credits on buildings makes it more difficult and sometimes more costly to go through that process. So we vetted that process and determined that wasn't the most viable solution for financing for this project. We were very confident at that time that we could have worked with Eagle to get state funding for the environmental cleanup. And with environmental cleanup funding, there's additional funding they provide, almost like a dollar to dollar for additional qualified expenses like select demolition, vapor barriers, industrial cleaning, things like that. Unfortunately, the building wasn't contaminated enough by Eagle's boxes. We did additional testing. We worked with the county to get additional testing done on the property to vet that out as far as we could go, which was one of the reasons why we had asked for an extension in that buy-sell period, was because we were doing additional testing to determine whether or not we could proceed with Eagle funding. And that was one of the conditions in the agreement, was to fully understand the condition of the building. So we did vet that out, and because of that, they turned back and said, no, we cannot fund your environmental cleanup, and we will not be funding the additional dollar-for-dollar qualified expenditures for those demolitions. So those two pieces fell away, and there's still a gap that persisted, and so we looked at brownfield, and we were discussing that with the brownfield board here as a piece to fill that gap for qualified expenses that meet the brownfield definition. So that's kind of where we're at on that component. Other parts that we're pursuing within the capital stack, we're talking with MEDC for the CRP grant. We've had good conversations with them. We're working through that. We've been talking with them, with your staff here, collectively to move forward in our application, which is a long process. On top of that, we worked with the Ottawa County Land Bank. We received, or in the process of receiving, a grant for funding for additional blight removal on the property. Like I said, CRP, MSF board through the TIF, the Brownfield TIF. So those are the incentives that we're pursuing as we can. We've looked pretty much wherever we can to try to find the most viable options to make this project work.
Have you approached the BLP?
In terms of?
Well, they caused a lot of the problem.
Oh, yeah.
Should they be a partner in this?
In cleaning up?
Yeah, and helping to clean up. I mean, I think some of us had heard that that was responsibility that they were talking about. But you haven't had any discussions?
I have not, no.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I remember from the beginning that we chose a buyer who was expert in restoring and repurposing iconic buildings, iconic historic buildings in small towns. So it shouldn't, I would think, be news to that buyer that it takes a while to get listed with the National Historic Registry and what the requirements are and the timeline is for the historic, and any kind of historic funding you might get. I mean, I'm hearing, from my perspective, and this is mine alone, but from my perspective, a lot of these issues were baked into the purchase price, all right? I think you got a bargain, but it came with some baggage. And to me, the fact that you came in and were willing to take this property at that price with promises and assurances to this city that you wouldn't need any more help and that you were going to turn this into something that would be special on our waterfront, that's kind of where I am. So I'd be interested in hearing where the others are. I think technically you meet the requirements for an obsolete district designation, property district designation, and I think that I think it is a blighted property, and it is an obsolete property, and both of those, the write-up honestly in the resolution isn't because it's in an area of otherwise obsolete properties. It's really because it's a blighted and obsolete property itself. The other question I have is, it looks like you're asking for the whole property to be designated. When I read the statute, it said that part of the property could be designated. I mean, right now, you've got authority to put condominiums up on a piece of that property that each of those lots is worth a substantial amount of money. So I sure wouldn't want to defer or abate taxes for any of that kind of development. I think that I'm not that interested in designating an obsolete property at this point, and even if I were, I probably wouldn't be interested in designating the whole property as obsolete and blighted. I think those are things that we need to look at more closely and try to figure out a better solution. But I guess I have one other question, and this would be for Elizabeth if she knows, which she may or may not. But is there any advantage to the developer of us declaring it an obsolete property district if we don't later offer tax abatement from the city?
You can create the district and not approve the application.
I understand that, but my question is, because the way I read the statute, they can go to the state also, not to abate our taxes, but to abate school taxes for up to 6 years. But, and I don't know whether, there's only 25 properties per year that the state will do that for, and I don't know whether this would be one of them, and I don't know whether it should be, but I feel like if we look at this, and I don't know, I don't want to speak for the others, but if we look at this as the city has done its fair share of trying to make this project go forward, if we don't designate it an obsolete property district, they can't go to the state and ask for help there. But if we do, they may be able to, but my guess would be if the city didn't support assistance, the state would not pick it as one of their 25 projects per year.
That sounds accurate.
Yeah, okay.
Is there, just to follow up on what the mayor said, is there other state, if we do designate this, is there other state programs available to them as a result of us designating this as a?
Yeah, that's more or less what my question was.
Yeah, is it another tool that we have?
Is there something else in the state? Maybe Dana knows.
No, Dan?
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Dana.
No problem. Not necessarily the rehabilitation district, but the establishment of an obsolete property by whoever the state is currently indicating is responsible for designating that. So the property can be designated as an obsolete property, and then that would make them eligible for like the CRP, for instance, through the MEDC.
But no other state programs would.
But the district is not necessarily required for that.
Okay.
What's the CRP, Dana?
I'm sorry, the Community Revitalization Program. So it's a grant and loan program.
Okay. All right.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if this is even before it's properly to even vote on it. I mean, it says the written request must be filed with the clerk and the qualified local government. I mean, so if that wasn't done, I don't know that we even could act on this if it wasn't filed properly for us to even consider, so.
So we want to table it then? If they want to, come back?
I don't know if we, I mean, a public hearing notice was, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? So what would you consider a written request?
Well, it sounds like you have some written requests that
Yes,
was
I've
sent to
submitted
you.
something in
But
writing.
the statute says the written request must be filed with the clerk of the qualified local government unit. It doesn't sound like that occurred. That's in order, so, I mean, if, we got to follow the process to even,
Part of what I would say is the issue here, and Elizabeth, it's with good intentions. You end up kind of as an agent for different entities in this process, as you're an agent for general economic development on behalf of the chamber. You're an agent for promoting a specific project by a developer, and in addition, you're contracted with us to provide us economic development consultancy services, and so that gets a little muddled. And I think, Ryan, is that where you are, that you're looking at this as muddled?
yeah, I think it's been muddled. I think we clearly needed something in writing to the clerk to consider this a written request from the developer to consider establishing this district. I don't think that we've brought this at this point on necessarily, although I think there's an argument there that the mayor's making related to the qualified local unit of government establishing it. But I do think that there would be benefit from, and this isn't specific, to a greater process that we're kind of discussed with our staff that we want to undertake, looking at these types of incentives and kind of develop a more holistic policy. And I think part of that maybe is process that we need to look at as far as, certainly the chamber's role as our kind of consultant, but also kind of our staff as far as our planner and city manager reviewing things, maybe providing a staff recommendation of some sort through that process. So, for me, I think I'd like to have that policy in place first, so we have something to, some guidelines. I think we're a little premature with this one in particular, given where the project's at.
Well, I think that they can apply.
Well, they certainly can.
And if
I
they
agree,
apply,
but-
I think we should address it. But frankly, if there's an application that comes from the builder himself, from the developer, I would like them to state the cause for it and give us more details about, and frankly, I'd like to see the pro forma. Why not consider it together if it's for one property? It's one thing when you create a district that's multiple properties. You're not going to do a business case analysis for everybody in the district. You're going to wait until someone comes in. But this is a situation where one property owner, developer, is asking for us to declare a district, and we have what you've provided, Elizabeth, which I would say is very generic. I don't know a better way to say it.
We've already did this once before.
Yeah, and I didn't vote for it because I thought it was,
But
you
it-
mean
but it
one
did pass.
property, one district? Yes, we did.
Yes, we have. We've done
Yep,
that.
we did. For
It's
the,
not uncommon. We've already done that.
right, and at.
And look at the results we got. Crescent Theater is a good example, a good result we got.
Okay, that's not the one I'm thinking about, Mike. I'm thinking about the one on North.
Seventh
Seventh
Street.
Street,
No,
yeah.
that's one that's in progress right now.
No, actually, they decided not to,
Follow through with it.
yeah, they decided not to follow through.
But anyways,
But the
Mackenzie's-
Crescent, I agree, the
Crescent Theater
Crescent-
is a good example.
Yeah. So,
We created a
so
district
you'd go
there.
forward with this?
Just creating a district, there's other opportunities that when you create that, isn't there? I think that opens up the door for possibility of something else, maybe somewhere. Not just from the state or from the federal government, but there's other opportunities.
Well, that was my question, and it doesn't appear that that's the case. So we can create the district and then allow them to present their argument.
Absolutely, and we can say yes or no then. But the thing of it is, I think moving forward with the district itself, the simple fact is, there is a piece of material that wasn't included in our packet. We just got today, all of us got it, was from Ottawa County. We just received it this afternoon in an email.
What was it?
Right, that essentially the assessor indicated the property's functionally obsolete.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or the,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just, if I would, Ryan, to clarify, on May 24th, Elizabeth did submit what was included in the packet, the letter requesting the establishment of the district, copying myself, Maria, and Ashley. So that has been submitted with the clerk.
But that was a letter
I
from,
have the memo from Elizabeth. I don't have the letter that's from the
Right.
company.
right,
Okay.
it's not the letter to
Okay.
the city or a representative of the city.
You want one from Grand Power Works?
I think that's what the statute says. Okay.
All right, just wanted to clarify that.
Not an attorney, but.
Well, unless, again, unless the city, if, yeah. We can vote on it now, which I'm actually happy to do, or we can table it, which I'm also happy to do. I would like, I guess, to see what the developer is saying, that justifies declaring, there's no question in my mind that this property is obsolete. But the question is, what benefit does making it designating it an obsolete property do? I guess it gives them an opportunity to request tax abatement from the city.
Your Honor,
Karen?
may I comment?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I think, what it comes down to for me is that, as both Councilmember Cummins and the mayor has said, when you establish a district, and we all know that this doesn't apply, this changes nothing regarding our zoning, right? If it's one single property versus multiple, it makes sense to do that as the first step. But when it is a district of one, property, it seems like we could turn down the application instead of providing that together. And that's what doesn't make sense to me. If you create the district and there's multiple properties, like along the Beach Tree Corridor, it makes sense because we don't hold back any one person applying. In this case, it's a one-to-one, which is why I think everyone here wanted to see more information. Otherwise, we could create this district needlessly, as opposed to as an opportunity. So, I don't know. I'm more in favor of tabling that. And I'm going to contradict myself here, though, too, and also say, in terms of listening to this, I believe everyone should have a fair shot if it meets all of the criteria. What I hear my colleagues saying, though, is we're uncertain about the written request and whether or not we've gone through the appropriate procedure, want to tighten that up, and I don't know that delaying is going to make a case any further. But I think you also heard from almost everyone on council that we're not very optimistic on giving more money in this in this case as well. So maybe this is better preparation for you, should you re-examine this and decide to come back.
I do understand. I understand what you guys are saying. For me, my intent coming here was to follow the rules of what is written out in this public act. And so that is step one, you go and you create the district, or you request the creation of the district. And then step two, then they can apply. And so we're simply following the procedures that have been spelled out in the public act.
Because we're dealing with the state here pretty much, and the word district, but it also goes on to say that, commercial property, but they put that word district in there, so we're all thinking it's a bigger picture than what it really is, but you're just isolating it to one spot.
Yeah, the district
I
can
really
mean
hate to
one or
use-
more parcels.
Right. I'd kind
That's
of.
when you see district, you're thinking large areas.
I'd kind of like, honestly, this is what I would propose, because I know we're kind of stuck right now. I would like to see a written request from the developer, and I would like the developer to assess what's on the property that justifies the obsolete designation. And if there is, because the statute also says it can be all or part, the district can be all or part of a piece of property. So I'd kind of like them to say, I don't like the idea of tax abatement on an entire property, and they build 5 condominiums on it, and we give up property tax on that. I mean, I think that's, nobody is going to want that, and I don't want to be giving that away. So I'd like the developer to make his best case, and honestly, I don't know why we have to do it in a 2-step process. Why not put together your case, since it's one property anyway, put together your case for justifying this, and explaining where you thought you'd find funding and how you've diligently applied and how it did not come through. And then let
How
us
it
look
affects
at,
your pro
and
forma.
how it affects, your ability to
It's-
succeed economically.
Procedurally, it's a 2-step process because they need a separate public hearing for the actual tax abatement request.
Okay, that's a good point. Thank you,
Have to
Maria.
follow. If you look back at the memo that we got, seeing the people at home didn't see this, or nobody knows anything about it, we got it just late in the day. It wasn't attached to it, that the county assessor declared an obsolete practice because it says, for several years, this diesel-fueled power plant provided peak use backup to the main generation capabilities of other plants tied to the grid. The fuel type, generation capability, and costs associated with maintenance and generation made that plant obsolete in comparison to more modern power plant facilities. Removal of the power generation equipment, including but not limited to generators and their foundations, fuel tanks with distribution systems, and electrical distribution system present unusual obstacles and costs related to reuse of the structure. Further, interior and exterior finishes, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing systems, which were original in the construction, required modernization. These combined reasons support the conclusion that the structure is functionally obsolete.
Okay, if it has to
So everybody
be,
knows exactly what we got.
if it has to be, that's good, Mike. If it has to be a 2-step process, is what you're
Yes.
saying, Maria, then I think we should vote. The procedural issue I see, Ryan, is the one you raised, which is how did it get to us? And I see some process problems we're going to have dealing with these going forward, given the relationships among all the players. So I'm okay tabling it, and we've already had the public hearing, and we can look at it at our next meeting with a written request for this designation that lays out the justification. But, so then we'll have a written request from the owner, and we'll have met that, criteria. And we have the assessor's information, so we can do the designation. You guys got any input?
Well, you kind of said it all earlier, from my perspective. You know, I made it very clear, you know, when we made a decision to sell the building to you, you know, for the $1 million, that, and I specifically said that, is there anything else you need? And you said no. And I really don't care if you couldn't figure out historic tax credits. That's your problem, not mine. And I will never, I'll never vote for this. Let you know, I won't vote for the district, and I will not vote for any tax abatement. The other council members can do what they want, but I'm just going to stand by what I said and what I said to the public on this subject. And that's where I stand. And you know, I've dealt with a lot of developers in my day, and you know, if you made a mistake, you made a mistake, but don't lay that on me. Don't lay that on the city. So I will not support this. Really doesn't matter what you send to me. Thank you.
Okay, are there others that feel that way? Okay,
I really think it should go through the proper process.
all right.
Like Ryan says.
Table it, ask for a written request from the developer for designation of the obsolete property district. We'll look at that separate. We've already had a public hearing. And then if you come through afterwards with a request for tax abatement, we'll look at that separately.
So is that two separate processes still?
Yes, it is. But I think the first one's relatively simple. It requires a written request from the owner of the property.
Yep.
Filed with the clerk.
Filed with the clerk.
With the point being, though, that you can include whatever information you think is relevant in creating the district in your information. So
Absolutely,
you can
yep.
make any case you'd like as far as even creation of the district in that written request. So.
And then the follow-up would be the introduction of the pro forma and the full discussion on that.
Yes, the explanation of why you need tax abatement to make this project economically viable. Okay, all right. So I've got a motion on the floor to table it. Yes, Ryan, from you?
Moved for that?
Cummins? Is that true?
I think you made the motion.
All right, I made the motion. McNally made the motion. Is there support for that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
No matter.
And are we postponing, are we just going to say postpone to a future meeting, or did you want to do it to a specific future meeting?
Well, I don't think, I
I
think
would
we
table it
can't.
till next meeting, yeah.
Well, I'm happy to table it till the next meeting, but if we don't get the, how about until the meeting following the request?
Are we tabling just the creation of the district?
The district.
Yeah.
We're tabling creation of the district, and we need
Which is a letter that we need from.
That's it.
We
Yeah,
need the,
so I would say next meeting.
well, it depends on when they submit the request. Right. Okay. Anything else?
May I make a comment? You just said something that triggered a thought of mine. You said the public meeting was held tonight on it. You haven't even got all the information. It seems like the public ought to be able to comment again when you get everything in order that you're asking for. I don't think you should just say, oh, we had the public meeting. That's kind of like the 7% and the 43%, that it's distorted.
It's a valid point. I'm going to have to.
Our staff can.
We're going to have to look at that with the city clerk, because there will be rules on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm also Jeannie Sherman at 421 Sand.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, if you want to go through the whole public hearing request again and have them submit their proposal again, then I would most likely recommend that you vote it down and we just start over from scratch if that's what you want to do. Or we can continue with the motion to postpone until you receive supplemental materials.
and augment it with another public hearing or not? Because I
Right.
think that's a valid point.
Technically, we can do a public hearing for it.
We won't have any more information other than the letter that states why it's an obsolete property and
Right,
why we're
but-
creating the district. We're not going to have the pro formas for everyone, including ourselves, to look at, because that's the first step, correct?
I will say, though, I need 10 days' notice to do a public hearing,
Public,
and it
yep.
takes a couple days lead time to get that published.
Yep.
So regardless, unless I get information tomorrow,
You can't
we're
do it
not
at the
going to
next
get
meeting.
it on time for
Yep.
the July 3rd
Be on
meeting.
time for the
Right.
next meeting.
Then maybe the simplest thing to do is vote on it now, based on what we have before us. You don't like it, Mike?
The motion on the, well,
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Has it been seconded?
We have a motion and a second to postpone.
Yep.
Okay, until the requisite, the clerk
Written
assures us the
request.
requisite requirements
been met.
have been met.
If there's not going to be any more, yeah, I'm ready to move forward on it.
Okay.
I'm ready to vote on that.
Okay. I got that. Any,
Postpone,
ready to vote?
to postpone.
McNally,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Sure, yes.
Lowe,
yes.
Cummins.
Yes.
Okay. Maria, would you move us on? New business?
Item A, consideration by City Council of a resolution to employ Abin Marsh of Benton Harbor, Michigan as the city's engineer of record through 2026 with up to 2 one-year extensions by mutual agreement. Administration recommends approval.
Can I get a motion to that effect?
So move.
And second.
I don't know that anybody's got any questions, Derek. Does anybody have any questions? You want to give us a presentation?
No.
I'm here to answer any questions if you
Okay,
have
good.
any, Aaron.
Anybody got questions? I will tell you, I asked Ashley one question, which is, have we got a list of standard contract terms for engineering and consulting with Abin Marsh? And it sounds like you guys have it in hand. I just don't want to see another set of bad contract terms, and it sounds like Ron's working on it, and we're going to make sure that as we award this contract to Abin Marsh, we award it on the basis of some equal, even-sided contract terms.
That's correct.
All right,
Derek, I do want to thank you for going through this. I know it's a pain, but I personally thought it was important that we go back out, because it has been a couple of years, and nothing against Evermarsh. They do a great, you understand. But, thanks for going through the process.
Yeah, no problem.
okay.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. Item B?
Consideration by City Council of a resolution to authorize the submission of a revitalization and placemaking grant application for infrastructure improvements along Harbor Drive in the amount of $1 million and commit the required local match and authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the necessary documents. Administration recommends approval.
Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there support?
Second?
Any discussion?
Just to make it clear, we're applying for a grant, there is a local match, but my understanding is that the local match dollars will be coming from our water and sewer fund dollars, dedicated infrastructure millage dollars, not from general fund dollars, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And we have very healthy fund balances, certainly in our water and sewer fund, although we could always use more, because there's a lot of water sewer needs that we have, and then our infrastructure fund is growing as that millage has come on board.
Correct. We've been cautious to not bring anything that's going to impact the general fund.
Okay, it's 4 major contracts. You have something, Kevin?
Because I'm not familiar with the project, so just bear with me. So this includes all the underground? Are you burying the lines too?
Power
The
lines
electrical
going
power
under?
lines?
The power lines in this area have been, let me see. There's a 2 blocks that have not been, but that would be buried. And most likely, prior to this project. This project going through I know the BOP's gotten some capital projects to bury all those.
Oh, okay.
This
But if not-
funding would not bury the power lines.
Yeah, this actual, our project would not address the actual BOP stuff, but I know it's in their plans to do it when we do it.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
The, you got the rebuilding of the deck.
Well, it's going to be a need.
Yeah, I guess the question is, I mean, you know, there's,
Yeah.
you know, this is my beef. I mean, there's some shops underneath that. I just think that, you know, why are we spending a lot of our money on that when it probably should be a bigger project, including those shops? It could be a heck of a development down there.
Right.
With all
right.
due respect to the lady, I don't want to.
No, that's, well, part of it is the application requires certain, you know, requirements, I guess. It makes our application look better. And part of that is the redevelopment of the park area, or in this case,
Okay.
Bicentennial Park and that deck. We can spend that money maybe in a different investment, with or without the shops underneath.
Okay.
I know there's maybe some grander plans, but without those, the deck's going to need to be replaced at some point.
Yeah.
And it gives us additional points, I guess, in the.
I was just keeping it back
No,
in
I
mind.
know.
Derek, is it going to be something equivalent to what we got down at, like the foot of Franklin? I mean, the stonework and things like that, or is it, the deck, I know, that deck isn't even that old, and it's pretty, that sun beats down on it pretty badly.
It does. So we've been working with Abba-Marsh and envisioning what that looks like. I don't think it would change much, but we get us some opportunities or different materials that maybe make it last longer.
Okay,
Things have changed over the years.
they have, yep. Okay, Maria, would you call the roll?
Fritz,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes,
Lowe,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. Item C, Maria, would you read it for us?
Consideration by City Council of a resolution to direct staff to conduct stakeholder meetings and release a request for proposals for paid parking evaluation and potential implementation in 2024 at the waterfront, beach, and a portion of Lake Avenue to be presented back to City Council for adoption. Administration recommends.
so move.
Support?
Discussion?
Yes.
So we go out for proposals, and where's this money coming from?
I'm sorry, Mike.
We're gonna go out for proposals, and it comes in, and we'll have to select somebody to do this. What part of the budget, is this coming out of the general fund, or where's it coming from?
It likely, we'd have to evaluate which fund would have the capacity for that. And again, based on the agreement for implementation, I know there are various models out there. Some would likely recover that through implementation and, of equipment and collect fees if implemented. So there's a lot of variation, so it's kind of challenging to answer directly. We haven't evaluated, because we don't know what the cost will be yet, from consultants based on the RFP process, so we haven't specified, but would likely be general fund.
Ashley,
Your Honor?
hang on one second, Karen, are the consultants also the people who sell us the systems?
I believe that was our intent, is to seek a consultant that would have the capacity to implement.
Your Honor, I would, as one who seconded the motion, I'd like to give Mr. McLaughlin the opportunity to say a few words to introduce this motion, or I would like to have that opportunity.
I mean,
Okay, can you hang on a second?
Mike,
Did you have anything further?
No, I just want to know where the money coming from, that's all.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I think this is what, at least I asked for at the last meeting. I don't think I got it out properly. But I think this is the way that we should go. Get an RFP out. Yes, it's gonna be, you know, hopefully it's gonna be a national firm that's gonna respond to this, that can really bring some expertise into the city and to really help us make the decision. Not that we have to make the decision, but at least we'll have I remember the mayor saying she wants the facts. Well, I think we have to get the facts before we can make a decision, and I absolutely agree with her on that. So I hope that RFP process will allow us to do that. And that's why I'm going to support this.
Okay, Karen, you got something?
Yeah, as I thought about the conversation that we had last time, and we've kind of revisited some of these, we seem to be talking about, I realized that there's some confusion regarding terminology, and it affects what's been completed to date and what has yet to be done relative to paid parking. Whenever you're evaluating an idea, or in this case, whether or not paid parking is feasible, and where, one conducts a feasibility study. A feasibility study is a high-level analysis, which the chief did quite well, and it helps decision makers make a determination of whether or not the idea has merit and warrants further detailed study. Here's what a feasibility study is not. It's not a detailed evaluation of various paid parking systems and models, nor is it a detailed cost-benefit analysis. It is also not a detailed implementation plan incorporating unique requirements and addressing major community concerns. It's a first step. City staff conducted a feasibility study regarding paid parking for the city of Grand Haven, which included an inventory of public parking spaces. Today, city staff are seeking council's guidance and determination whether or not they should proceed to the next step. Simply put, today we are at the first of multiple checkpoints. Secondly, when we talk about paid parking, everyone needs to understand that it is not a widget. There are many different parking management systems and models out there. In fact, there's been significant migration over the past 10 years from a hardware parking meter kiosk focus to a digital focus. Technology has advanced quite a bit. There are different models with different enforcement processes, access, control, ownership, reporting, and payment digitization. For example, there's smart parking systems out there, which Mr. Hagan has alerted us to. There's also pay-by-plate method, which does not use unsightly parking meters, something that was mentioned as a deterrent at our last meeting. Drivers simply punch their license plate number into a phone app or a kiosk and pay via credit card or debit card. They can reserve a spot for as long as they want, or if needed, drivers can add more time remotely via phone app without returning to their car. Other smart parking management systems utilize ground sensor technology, overhead sensor, or camera-based technology. Some systems are positioned to integrate with car charging stations. Others offer the opportunity to assist users in identifying where open spots are via an app sensor technology. For these reasons, we are at this feasibility. Does this warrant further study? Does it have the potential to generate revenue and cover some very much needed cost here for the city? It's a go, no-go decision. But for these reasons, I'm in support of what the city staff has put forward to proceed to this next phase of the process, evaluation of a parking management system for fit with our city. By casting the net wide with an RFP to vendors with different models, including their cost-benefit analysis, which should include some sensitivity to a lot of different considerations that we have discussed here. Once that's completed, city staff should come back to council for another checkpoint. Additionally, I'd like to say that my support for this is contingent on two assumptions. One, that residents would not be charged for parking, and that two, that the Main Street, downtown merchants, or Washington Square Centertown, or the Beach Tree Corridor were also excluded. And that we're looking at the beach waterfront. I'm not, the last thing that I would say is that there's been discussion, and I see that we've omitted our Lake Forest Chapel lot. The city-owned parking lot adjacent to the chapel on Lake Avenue is, you could call it the cemetery parking lot, but historic cemeteries do not have parking lots. Anyone that goes to a cemetery understands that, especially a historic one like Lake Forest Cemetery, you drive through the cemetery roads, whether it's a funeral, you pull over to either visit the grave, or that's where you proceed. That's just how it's done for burials. The chapel does have service and events from time to time, requiring the adjacent city-owned lot, Memorial Day, for example. However, the signage posted indicates that this is a lot for backup beach parking. Anyone who lives in the area or drives down Lake Avenue also knows that during the season, particularly on the weekends, that it is used for beach parking. In the wintertime, that lot is wide open all winter. Moreover, taxpayers and our residents are subsidizing the cemetery, and I don't even want to know or mention how much it is because I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was more in the tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. 200,000, thank you, Jim. Our Department of Public Works does a fantastic job. It keeps up Lake Forest Cemetery as though it was one of our pristine parks, something I believe our community wants to continue. I see people running, jogging through the cemetery, walking their dogs on a daily basis. Several months ago, at our initial budget review, City Council discussed implementing paid parking in the chapel lot as a means to cover some of this subsidization that we're doing through the cemetery maintenance cost. This was well received by the Department of Public Works. So I would like to ask that those spots be included in the analysis going forward. Lastly, there's been a lot of pushback from our community around some of the tax incentives. And when we look at waterfront parking, we are talking about the interior, in particular, the interior city lot that is contained within Peerless Flats. Many of my constituents don't even know that Peerless Flats doesn't own it, and that is public parking in the incentive there. So I think we need to include that in the analysis as well. I know it's identified by zone, and it might be included in the waterfront, Ashley, but I think we need to include that in the potential areas.
To study.
Thank you, Your Honor, that's it.
To study, to put those areas as part
And
of the
those
yeah.
included in the study.
I agree.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think I agree with the comments that have been made. This is next step, further study, further engagement. Our staff, over 2 city managers, have recommended this as a revenue option. Not taking more or asking for more from city residents via, tax increases, but, asking non-residents to help pay for a portion of the very real costs that we have to maintain our beautiful waterfront, our parking infrastructure, to provide public safety services when they come. And anybody that on this council, there's an election going on that simply states that they're against paid parking, that's fine, but they should tell you as a voter how they're going to pay for our very real needs to maintain our waterfront, to pay for our pension liabilities, to maintain our public safety services. Simply, waiting for, growth in the community. We want some incremental growth over time, but that's not going to solve all of our immediate problems. There's limitations on that. For example, inflation went up 8 or 9%, CPI-wise this past year, but we could only go up to 5% as far as property tax increases. That's what the state set them at. There's a lot of other factors in that equation, but so folks that are against this as a revenue generating option, I would say, okay, well, how else are you going to raise revenue? Are you going to increase taxes? Are you going to take on debt? Which I think this community, a few years ago had a pretty big discussion about wanting to pay as we go to the extent that we could. Or are you going to cut costs? And where are you going to cut costs at? I mean, public safety is almost half of our budget. I think we appreciate the public safety services that we have. So they should provide specifics to you. This is our city staff who have worked on this over 2 administrations, over a number of years to bring us to the point where we need to continue to study this as a viable option along our waterfront. This doesn't include our downtown. I don't think that, some of the coverage has made that very clear, and this is not impacting our city residents, as they're already paying their portion of parking through their taxes. There's no such thing as free parking. Somebody's paying for it, and right now it's entirely on our city taxpayers' backs. And we have very real costs, and we have to find a way to pay for them, and I think this is something worthy of further study. Thank you for what you've brought forward. I look forward to, evaluating it further as we continue on. So, thank you.
Mike?
As you remember, last time we were discussing the paid parking and stuff and that, I was pretty adamant that our police chief is public safety is what he is. He's not an expert at it. And this is a good move for us to move forward and at least get somebody here, has expertise on it. And I'll still stand by that. We need the information. We don't have it. We didn't have it the last time we were trying to vote on this. We did not have the correct information. We're just going by assumptions, and we don't need to be assuming anything. We need to move forward, making sure we get credible information. So I'll support this here to go forward with this. Just get somebody here and give us the information, what we need.
I think paid parking won't be good for our town overall, though I admit the possibility of a new revenue stream is very tempting. If paid parking drives beachgoers to other communities that have free beach access, our businesses will suffer. I feel paid parking will eliminate one of the few free places families can get down to the beach in the summer, and I like that about our town. I think it promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you drive by the beach on a Saturday or Sunday, you'll see what I mean. When you charge for beach parking, we may set up a situation where only rich people can come to the beach. I've previously expressed concerns about the changes that will occur to our sightlines along the riverfront and the beach with the addition of kiosks and signage. That sightline is one of our greatest treasures, and I don't like ruining it. I believe this will certainly have a negative effect on it. I'm concerned about the businesses along our waterfront that count on free parking for their customers, just as downtown merchants do. Downtown, there are nearby residential streets on which customers can park, not so much. There are not nearly as many. I hear proponents talk about how much money Muskegon has made with paid parking, but they fail to mention that the Pere Marquette lot in Muskegon is primarily a single large lot, more equivalent to our state park lot, than a series of small dispersed lots we own. When you can man or automate a single gate for a large lot and not rely on dispersed parking infrastructure, your implementation costs will be lower, your connectivity issues will be substantially simpler, your effect on the beachscape will be minimized, and your user experience less off-putting. I've never heard of a parking expert who sells you parking equipment and software who won't assure you he can make some money, but of course he gets his share off the top. I read the parking study done in the McGinnis years. The purpose of that study really was to force a parking structure into our downtown. The premise of the study was that revenues from paid parking would first pay off the cost of implementation, and then half would be used to maintain parking lots, while the other half would be used to create infrastructure downtown that promoted development. Essentially a parking structure, though they never said the words out loud. The steps we're voting on today are inconsistent, or the step we're voting on today is inconsistent with the recommendations done by the McGinnis study, which recommended no piecemeal approach or beta test by area, and no fee for parking on the streets by the state park. I don't even know where that one came from, to tell you the truth, but it was one of their recommendations. So I agree that information is good, but I think overall, I'm not going to support paid parking. I can vote to get more information, but I will be suspect in analyzing what comes in. Could you call the roll, please, Maria?
McLaughlin?
Yes.
Lowe?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
McNally?
Yes.
We have a new business item D.
Yeah. Would you read it for us, please, Maria?
Approve budget amendments for the general fund, Fund 101, Major Streets Fund, Fund 202, and Local Streets Fund, Fund 203.
Karen, can I get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And is there support?
Second?
I'm sorry.
Second by McLaughlin. I think he got it in
Got it in
first,
first?
so to speak. Karen, you pulled this one. Do you want to tell us what's going on?
Yeah, I guess we have a lot of little movements, Emily, here in this, and just getting and going through, I was really puzzled why we would move anything that was budgeted for the pension fund. I thought we were looking to put more money into paying off our pension, unfunded pension liability. We also don't have any new information and won't have that until July, is that correct? And so making all of these movements into buckets right now didn't make any sense to me without a lot more further consideration regarding where that money should go and, you know, what's most needed. So that's why I wanted to have more of a discussion. I'm not sure that we shouldn't just table this, to be honest with you, but go ahead.
Emily Green, I'm Finance Director for the City of Grand Haven. And thank you for your question. So the budget amendments and the movement specifically in that 716, those, I look at these numbers and these are based on what we are required to pay. Remember, the percentage or the monthly amount that we're supposed to pay was decided last year. So this is just, when I look at the numbers, and basically these are in like the DPW accounts, a lot of those. And at the beginning of the year when we budget, we allocate the funds, what we think the expenses are going to be, and say, you know, this winter we didn't have as many snowstorms, so we maybe didn't have as much in streets, but we had more in parks, or we didn't have as much in one department as we did in the other. So a lot of this is just looking at the amounts that are going to be expensed this year, and that's what those budget amendments are for. And so we're not necessarily taking the funds away from that. It's just our monthly amount was set last year, and that monthly amount will be different next year as it's going to be different the year after. And so
That's true, but what we will know is we'll understand from a defined, you know, from the pension perspective, how bad off that estimate that they gave us is from, you know, from what we're going to actually have to pay. So we could get further behind and grow our unfunded liability by paying the minimum, what we're required to pay, but not paying enough. Secondly, we also don't know if we're going to fall. We all hope we don't fall below 60%, you know, which creates other kind of issues for us. I am just reluctant with that with the pension of taking any money away, because the next thing the headline will be is, hey, we took money from Harbor Island to pay off the pension. No, until we know more about where that's at, which I understand won't be until end of July or August.
usually July or August is
July.
when we get
Right, they complete the fiscal year
should
and
be
have
coming out.
Yeah,
Correct.
so when we get that, I think we can make a better decision about that, and that's why I'm just reluctant, just after we approve the budget, to make all of these detailed changes or anything specific to the pension moving
Yep.
money.
So with this, this has been an annual thing. In the last, but the last council meeting in June, we have generally in the past always done budget amendments. And what we're doing is we look at the numbers what we projected, and what we then we actually run some calculations, detailed calculations, to make sure our numbers are where we're supposed to be. Because when we file our audit, we have to look at, the auditors and the state look at our budgeted numbers versus what our actual numbers are. So I get what you're saying, and I agree. I think we should make sure that we're covering our pension and what the expenses that we are going to have relating to that. But at this point, MERS has told us what our monthly amount due for the non-union and the POLC and the DPW, and so that's the monthly amount. We are not making additional payments to MERS yet. Maybe we will be able to, but we're not, that wasn't in our budget this year, and it's not going to be in our budget. And so that's what these movements are.
Well, hold on. We increased the mills. We haven't discussed how that money is going to be spent.
But, so, right, so that's next fiscal year.
Oh, that's
for
next
the
fiscal year.
23,
Okay, okay.
24.
Karen,
This
can
is-
I?
All right, fair enough.
Can I clarify whether you're asking about those individual line adjustments or that $750,000 allocation?
Well, there's that too, there's that too, where I don't feel like we've completely and we don't have more information.
And that's
Okay,
not set in
so
stone.
the motivation and what you're telling me, and I'm
That's
pushing
okay.
back just a little bit, just because we're doing that so that we don't have differences from budget to actual for an audit.
Correct,
Trying to
correct.
get more,
So you'll notice some of these numbers are increased and some of them are decreased. And when we file the audit looks, the auditors, that is part of the audit, and that audit is recorded with the state. And the state looks at the budgeted numbers versus the actual numbers. And if there's too much of a variance, then we have, there's maybe a corrective action plan or something that needs to be filed. And so this is kind of part of the process of governmental accounting.
Yeah, you can't expend more than we appropriated, and so you're trying to make the adjustments for what the end of year appropriations actually were.
again, if you had left the pension fund alone, I probably would not have even objected, but the fact that you've moved, you've modified that.
So are there just the 715 or 716 lines that you're looking at?
Well, that's what jumped out at me, and then I realized we got this, and I honestly, to go line by line,
Right, because there are a lot of them. I mean, there are not,
there's lot of gives. It just seemed to me that, it struck me that we've not had a conversation about how, some of that money, where that money should go. And I think I've, beaten a dead horse on sort of, on the pension, unfunded pension liability. That is not a place where we're going to get any grants, where there isn't any potential funding. It is all on us.
right,
And it's only going to get worse.
right.
So,
Can I maybe just show two lines for the
Well-
difference? And the reason being is because if we look at the Major Streets Fund, and the one department, we're actually reducing, we are decreasing the amount. But the reason we're decreasing it is because we didn't pay, like our payroll out of that specific department was not as high as we projected it was going to be at the beginning of last year. And so because, I'm guessing with the major streets, that's the snow plowing, so we didn't have a very difficult winter where we had guys out, overtime, everything else. And so that specific department maybe didn't have as much payroll there. And this is based on, our defined benefit is based on the amount of payments that we're making for each of the employees that are still in the defined benefit. And so when we look at that, but then it's increased in one of the defined benefit lines that's in another department, which means, instead of them being in the 476 department, they were in the 473 department, and so the defined benefit in that department needs to increase, because instead of working in the 476 department, they worked in the 473 department. So it's technical, and we look at this pretty closely so that the appropriations are as accurate as we can have them.
so, here,
Yep.
I understand you're trying to avoid a lot of, variations on, audit and try to get it as precise before the end of the year and kind of finalize it. I will kind of go along with this, provided we have an opportunity to come back and either, whether that, maybe I'm the only one that needs that, and the two of you can kind of take me through, but I'd like to look at some of the decisions about where we've placed some of the money, because I'm not really sure, the reason, I'm not really sure we've looked at the pension as being something that we need to attack. And I would like to do it once we have the pension report
Yeah, and I-
completed in July. I'd like to sit down with you.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about it, but then we continue to say we're going to pay the minimum, and we did that for 10 years. That's what got us into the,
Correct.
place that we're at.
Correct,
Right?
but we
So
really don't even know what
we
we're.
also, there's
what-
too many variables. I know.
What we're starting.
That's
so
what scares me.
Our July 1 number is based on December
2 years,
31
yeah,
of
exactly.
2021, excuse
Which,
me.
which will continue to dig the hole, my sense is, if we don't do something else. So
Right.
if you will agree to have a conversation to get me comfortable with where we're
Absolutely.
pushing
We
that
are-
separate.
We are always open to conversations and discussion. I mean, that is, our doors are open. And so, yeah, this is kind of just it's the process, right? It's the process of, we're at the end of the fiscal year, this is the last
Yeah.
council
Trying to
meeting
refine the numbers
prior
in each,
to-
I get it, yeah.
And so this is the process, it is the process. Plus, we got the LCSA funding and, the diesel plant sold, and so we wanted to book that revenue, show that revenue as received as well, so that our revenue lines are more accurate, because.
Emily, may I just interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
These adjustments is normally what we usually do to make sure that we have a clean audit, correct?
Correct, yeah.
That's
It-
what,
it's
that's what
just
the
part of- it's
process is
part
all
of-
about,
it's
is
part of
making.
the audit
Right,
process.
so we have a clean audit when it comes to the state. When our auditors come in, we get a clean audit, get a good report back from the state. That's what these adjustments are for.
Yeah, because say, that the LCSA funds for the Local Community Stabilization Act, that was $541,000. If my revenue line is that low, there might be, the state may have an issue with that. And so we try to make it, the less issues we have with the state, the better. And we try to have, like Mike said, clean audit. So I'm more than happy to sit down, and, Ashley and I are more than happy to sit down to talk this through. I think with MERS, we are still, and I so appreciate you wanting to look and be proactive on taking care of that. But we really, until we get this report that shows what our payment is
The
going to be.
impact of the, right.
Yes. The conversion, it's.
I'd like
we're
to
not
see a
going to know.
longer-term plan in place.
To take care of that.
To take care of that, yes. And I don't feel like we've touched that yet, so.
Right.
But I agree with you, until we have more information, it's hard to do that.
It is, and I think that's the problem, is we don't really know what we're dealing with at this point. We don't know what that liability is. We, with the conversion, the number of employees who converted, is that number, does it look better? Does it look much worse? We don't know. And that's that's the hard thing to face.
Emily, when we finally do see that number, is it going to be a harbinger of things to come? I mean, will the first year's numbers clarify for us what we're looking at going forward?
I think we'll have an idea of
Better?
what we'll have an idea of what the actual liability is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can have a game plan, right? The 750,000 that we just suggested moving, and that is not tied to the Harbor Island remediation. If we want to do something different, we can. But at the budget work session, we stated when the sale goes through, we would like to move that 750,000 for no other reason than to have funds available. So if there are grants available that need matching funds, we have funds there. If
But-
we need to do something else with them, we will.
Yeah, because I believe that if you got a $65 million problem, which what they're estimating, $750,000, it's going to be earmarks. They're not going to require a 10% down.
No.
It's going to be an earmark from the state and an earmark from the federal government. And, I kind of agree that 750 we should be able to play with. But at the same time, every time you listen to a presentation, they keep telling, well, we have to do this, and we have to do this, and we have to do this. And
I think
750 could
we're, I
be getting
think we're
eaten up.
going to need money to move forward
it
on
could be
Harbor
get-
Island, and that's why these guys have shifted it over there, and I don't know that we've seen any sign of earmarks yet, Kevin.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, but
I'd love to see it, but I haven't
Well,
seen it yet.
or
yeah,
you're
we also have the ARPA funds that are sitting there
Yeah.
that we can use.
On the pension, though, we've got a lot of things going on because we have, the people who moved over weren't the people driving the high unfunded liability. Those are people who weren't vested, so they moved over to defined contribution. The larger percentage of the unfunded liability is for the people who have already retired or not. So this could drive our assets, our percentage down a lot more than we think. And there's all those other, variables in there. And so, Your Honor, you asked the question of, is it going to be for things to come? Well, it'll give us an indication of the size. It doesn't eliminate all of the variability, but at least we have a certainty 50-plus years out that it's going to end, at some point. It's just,
We'll have a
the
better picture.
the larger the amount, it creates havoc on our finances. So if we can get that down, we're not going to be subject to some of the variability that pension plans bring. So to pay it off earlier is a good thing, or reduce that unfunded liability. Hence my concern about not allocating enough.
And if there's something that, if in the budget document next year, you want me to allocate a certain amount to, start making additional payments, we can do that. But we need to have money to do that.
We do.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
what stuck out for me was not the pension, that's Karen, but the professional contractual line items. A lot of them was doubled from what was in the budget. Can somebody explain to me why, how did we go over by that amount of money? Just some of these literally doubled from what the budget was. There was an increase, and I gotta find it again, because there was so many of them. If you look down through all your professional contractual, for instance, 760, 730, professional contractual went from 22,250, and you added an increase of 42,750.
Yep.
So now the requested budget is 65,000.
Yep.
Wow,
And I
whoa,
would
wait,
have
where's that come
to-
from?
Yeah, and I'd have to look exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna say
It
these
could
things
be-
probably, we gotta take offline, because.
Yeah, I understand,
Yep.
that's what stuck out at me, just
Yeah.
to let you know. We can talk about it, but
And it could be just the cost of everything has increased, so
Mm-hmm.
we, these are services or
Well,
whatever.
it
So
just-
with inflation,
but
the
it just
cost of
seems to be
everything
constant
increased.
across all professional contractual, that's all.
Some of them go up, some of them go
It
down.
just might be one of those things that you shoot out to us in advance, well in advance, so that we could get to you individually if we have, some questions before it shows up in a, packet. I mean, I'm talking about next year,
Yeah.
as you do that. That would be very helpful for me.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay,
I can do that.
we good to go? Call the roll.
Fritz,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
McNally.
Yes. All right. I think we've got report by city council. Mike, you got anything?
Oh, I got all kinds of things.
Of course.
First of all, I want to know, if you go down Lafayette Street, if you're coming down from between Third and Fourth Street, looks like a donkey road pretty much. It's, when is it going to be paved? I want to take a good look at that. Especially on the south side. A lot of kids use that for skateboarding and that, and I tell you what, even if you park your car there, it's like riding over a gravel road, like at my farm.
It's Lafayette and what, Mike?
Between Fourth and Third, the hill there, it's pretty well deteriorated, it's really bad. Also, the guy, I was walking there just checking the street out, and come to find out, he's planted his own tree in there because one of our trees died, so he went and got one from the BLP, but he wanted a gator bag for it, and I told him, I said, well, a gator bag would be about 10 times the size of the tree that you have. But he was hoping that you guys would put a tree in for him at some time, but he's content with his red bud tree he's got from the BLP, so That was another thing. Second of all, another one is the drinking fountain. We used to have a drinking fountain down on Washington Street down here, which you could, dogs could drink out of it, and also little kids can drink out of it, and adults. It was like a 3 drinking fountain. That's no longer there. They have a trash can over the area. And that needs to be addressed. And also the drinking fountain in Central Park is not working. And also I want to know when Ferry Street between Taylor and Robbins Road is going to be repaired. I want to know update on that because that's pretty bad. We need to keep an eye on this. I like that people are asking me, when is this going to be done? I'd like to get an update on what our roads are going to be, what the schedules are. I can make a list of about 20 other things, but I'll just let that go for now.
If you have a list, email it to Derek and Hull.
Okay, if we can get that out, that'd be really appreciated.
I'm good.
Kevin?
I'm good. Thank you.
Karen?
I guess, first of all, I'd like to say congratulations to our city clerk. The Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks has recognized Maria for completion, right? The program criteria and attained her prestigious Michigan PMC certification. So I just wanted to say congratulations to our clerk. Secondly, I just want to add one more thing to Mr. Fritz's list. I received a question from our constituents about why Columbus and Fifth is not a four-way stop. Washington and Fifth is a four-way stop. Franklin and Fifth is a four-way stop. The question is, why is Columbus not a four-way stop? So if you could just pass that on, just want to be able to respond. Couldn't give them an answer why. Thank you.
Ryan?
Echo my thanks to you, or congratulations to you, not thanks, but congratulations to you, Maria, with your certification. So a lot of work went into that. So congratulations on that. I think Ashley's working on setting up a meeting between me and Mr. Witherall for Friday to work on our joint meeting agenda. So if there's any topics or suggestions, I'm all ears. Heard one tonight related to the coal yard. I think we'll anticipate an update from staff on how they're doing with developing a plan, hopefully to work together going forward. But if there's other items, certainly let me know. Attended the first Pride Festival in our community. The Grand Haven Pride Festival committee did a fantastic job. They're expected, I think, 500 people, 1,000 showed up. So that speaks a lot to the community, supporters, allies that showed up, and are willing to recognize and support our LGBTQ community. Very important. And special guests from the Lieutenant Governor, grateful to have had him in town to kick off our first Pride Festival in our community as well. Attended the League of Women Voters Forum. I really appreciated them putting on the forum and the questions that were asked. It's important that folks, educate themselves and vote. And then I want to thank Ashley. Actually, we've had a lot of more sensitive topics or hot button topics that have arisen over the last few weeks. Her, Chief Hawk, others have done a fantastic job of keeping us in the loop more than she already does, and getting ahead of some concerns and letting us know what's going on, so we're in the loop. So big thank you for your communication efforts.
I just had a few things to add. Congratulations, Maria. I delivered welcoming remarks at the Pride Fest and introduced the Lieutenant Governor, and I got a State of Michigan coin, which I think is a real collectible, so not sure what to do with it, but if anybody knows a child who needs one, I usually pass them off to somebody who's interested. Attended the ribbon cutting for the Girl Scouts in their new digs on Franklin. Mike did too, yeah. And it was very cool. I don't know if it's the middle condominium in a bank of condominiums, brand new condominiums on Franklin that were done by a Capstone, right? Yeah, and they've got their little trefoil green symbol up on their building and went inside, and it was very nice. It was, they've got a great kitchen with a meeting space, open concept, and then upstairs they had a bunk room that I was assured was for the leaders, and then they had a general craft room that they could throw mattresses or air mattresses down on so the scouts could stay overnight. But it was a very cool facility. I enjoyed seeing it. I participated in the League of Women Voters Forum, as did all the mayoral candidates, some spirited and good-natured discussion. And this afternoon, I attended a Tri-Cities Habitat for Humanity luncheon with our esteemed city manager. Learned about their programs generally and their expansion into southern Muskegon County and about projects scheduled for Grand Haven and the Tri-Cities area. Reminder for everybody, Art Festival this weekend, Friday from 12 to 5, Saturday from 10 to 5, Sunday from 10 to 5, and apparently the Art Festival Family Fun Day is Saturday from 10 to 2. That's all I got. Ashley?
No update on my end. About covered it.
That's fine. All right, at this time, I'm going to make a second call to the audience. Members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address and will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. Those not physically present who would like to may call in at 616-935-3203. Thank you.
Doug Vance, 100 Washington. I'd like to publicly thank Ashley for making an attempt to solve a parking problem that I've been talking about for over a year. I don't know if it's the straw that broke the camel's back or not. I'm not ready to make a major announcement tonight, but you folks sit up there and you make decisions for all kinds of more important things than parking, although parking was on your agenda tonight. And there are, I don't know how many residents in Grand Haven now, but, us business owners downtown struggle day by day to keep our doors open. And you make decisions based on whatever you feel is best for the city. But if the businesses downtown don't succeed, then neither does the city of Grand Haven as a place to come to enjoy for whatever reason. And we have a beautiful city. I've been here since I was a kid. My dad had a barber shop on 7th Street. I rabble-roused the whole town. Had a paper route that ran the whole west side of Beacon Boulevard. But I've just about had enough. You've closed the first block of Washington. You start coming down Washington Street, and what do you see? A road closed sign down there. Looks awful. I mean, I have to admit, I think last year it looked better down there than it does this year. Apparently Anna's House gave up on it. I'm not sure what's going on there. It just doesn't look as inviting as it did last year. But it was somebody's decision, in spite of the fact that the majority of the business owners didn't want it. Paid parking is going the same way, the direction it looks like. Majority of business owners say don't do it. A number of you are very much for it because of the revenue. You keep hitting us for more revenue. I talked about it earlier. There's only so much we can do. We can't keep increasing our prices and increasing our prices and increasing our prices. Our revenue is down. You're talking about a new opportunity for a 200-seat restaurant on Harbor Street. How's that going to impact the restaurants that are already down there? How's that going to impact them? You got to think about the city of Grand Haven as a whole, which includes the business owners downtown. And if you don't, you're going to continue to see the turnover that you're witnessing time after time after time. And I'll just tell you, we might be next. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. Hi, Cecil.
C. Bradshaw, 31 Sherman. First of all, I appreciate the discussion you guys had during the public hearing. And I got to tell you, when I pulled up the act and started looking at it, I was thinking, if I were a city councilman, I would sure would want an attorney looking at this thing, trying to figure out what is what and what's down and so on. So I was obviously wrong, and thank you for the correction on that. And the other thing is that I guess I got a little worked up near the end there, which I did not intend to do or plan to do, but I did. And I guess because it's been a while since I've been on the planning commission, but it just seems like changing a zoning district should be the responsibility of the planning commission first, and then bringing it to the city council. And so I thought, number one, that the process was wrong, that it was, and the letter that did get generated was addressed to Brian, and it wound up here, and I was really surprised, why is this not going to the planning commission first? But anyway, thanks for the meeting tonight. The discussion was great, and we'll see you again.
Thanks, Cecil. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thanks, guys.